Night Owls.
Crossing dimensions of time and space. Technology beyond comprehension. They are watching. They are waiting.
We're not having nightmares. This has got to be real.
They are already here.
There's an enormous number of sightings where there's missing time involved, where people don't remember what happened to them directly after this 2 or 3 hour gap in their life. So this is typical of abductees.
So at that time, he just explained that abduction, was when they come and they would take these people and they do things to them.
And they sometimes return from abduction events with unusual marks and scars and bruises on their body.
I remember being taken up in a very, very large ship, for lack of a better word. It was a gigantic room and it was round. It wasn't lit very well. It was subdued lighting. It had a strange smell in the air, very cold. And I would just be placed on this stainless steel table. All of a sudden, to my left, this tall being with very bony structure started approaching me. He had a huge head, and it was kind of like lots of bone structure to his head. Large, black, almond-shaped eyes, slits for a mouth, no nose to speak of, no ears, very scrawny little body. And I remember feeling terrified. He didn't say it with his lips, I just heard in my mind. He said, "I'm the doctor." It was almost like, what's he going to do to me?
As night falls, suddenly every sight and every sound can unnerve you. Can we really trust our own minds?
When you tell people about your experiences, do they believe you?
It's not my job to convince anybody. It's my job just to tell you what I've experienced. If you believe it, fine. If you don't believe it, I don't care.
Some of them have long-term, lifelong relationships with the humans that they interact with, and they create hybrid children.
What is still true is that there's still kind of a reptilian side of our brain.
They're friendly and they're helpful, and very often they will answer questions that the experiencer might have.
If I could sit down with one of them right now, I'd ask them one question. Why me, and for what reason?
Are we being visited by otherworldly beings on a regular basis? Night Owls goes in search of the truth.
Alan Robson with you for Close Encounters. And I'm at a place right now that hundreds of thousands of people from Britain travel to every year, Florida. And yet, I'm at a place called Cabo Canaveral, Cape Canaveral. In the distance, I can see the conning towers where spaceships and space shuttles fly into space. I've been around talking to a lot of people. You can hear everything that I've got. Some people didn't want to talk to us. Some people did. You're going to get the full story tonight. And why here? Why in Florida? Well, I'm actually at a place that's been occupied by human beings for 12,000 years. And the people who lived here were very, very special indeed. The native Indians from this part of the world were a different colour to anywhere else on planet Earth. They were dark red. Not suntanned, not sunburnt. They were dark red. And from the years 5000 BC up to 2000 years BC, this area around what is now Cape Canaveral had a fascinating culture of its own, but a culture unlike any of the other Native Americans. A lot of people say it's because this area, this precise place where, coincidentally, maybe, the Americans decided to build one of their biggest NASA installations. I'm standing in the Indian River at a place called St. John's, staring across sandbanks and sea towards the place on Earth that most people get a chance to look at here in Florida. But tonight we're not here to talk about people who lived long ago. We're here to tell you that on the planet right now, we are living with aliens.
Ancient monuments, precisely aligned to celestial events. History written in stone, honoring otherworldly rulers. And a calendar accurately predicting shifts in the Earth's axis every 26,000 years. Did the Maya of Central America really create one of the most advanced civilizations of ancient times? Or did their intelligence originate from somewhere else? Perhaps out of this world.
They didn't have metal, they didn't have electricity. What they did have is advanced mythology, advanced language, and advanced religious culture.
They understood astronomy to an incredible degree, more so than any of the societies at the time.
The Mayans were absolutely convinced that timing was crucial because the gods were going to come back.
As you can hear, I'm splashing about Indian River, just wondering what it must have looked like if the Native Americans were telling the truth. And we hear stories from South America. We've covered this in great detail in previous shows, how they all claim to have witnessed shining creatures coming from the stars. The Native Americans, their ancestors, people that bred with their tribes, disappeared back up to the stars. That's why whenever you watch these American Western films, whenever a Native American wants to bury one of their own, they build huge high platforms right up to the sky and rest the body as high up as possible so that they can return to the rest of their family up there in the stars. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, I know it's a beautiful day here, absolutely gorgeous, got to be, oh blimey, middle 70s here, probably 80. My arms are beginning to burn, and of course I've slapped a bit of sun cream on, but it's not helping too much. I am sizzling here. And yet, can you imagine being a Native American, looking up to the skies and seeing these shining creatures come down? Now, it may well be that you don't want to believe 12,000 years of history, because the Native Americans have written and talked about the shining creatures, their ancestors in the stars. They've talked about that since the dawn of their being. Hundreds of sightings all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of abductions, first-hand accounts, and we can now come up with, if what everybody's telling us is correct, or even if that magical 5% are telling us the truth. Alien species have been working with military forces, maybe even deciding what our future is going to be, without ever consulting us. And there are certain types of aliens. There's the Syrians, not from Syria, but from a star system called Sirius B. People say they're ancient, with a gift for curing people. They gifted the ancient Egyptians with medical and astronomical information, helped them build the pyramids and their great temples that they couldn't have built on their own. The Mayans, apparently, in South America, just down the road from where I am, they had this special relationship with people from Sirius B. They played a part in the disappearance of them, but not before they left artifacts, the amazing crystal skulls that we still don't have the technology to build ourselves, yet there they are in museums across South America. Also from Sirius B, the Atlanteans. Apparently there was a huge event that sunk Atlantis. Everybody's heard about it, nobody can find it, but we knew that it existed. Well, apparently the people from Sirius B led rescue operations. The Dogon tribe of West Africa, they too have details of exactly how to get to Sirius B. Now, we didn't know that until the late 1950s. The Dogon tribe knew it 500 years AD. How? It's far, far too far to ever see with a human eye or a telescope. So they were involved during our past, and we don't know how much, and are they still involved now? Also, how many times have you heard people say, oh, but it was the Greys. I saw this short figure, and it had big white eyes, tiny little nostrils, and a slit mouth. The Zeta Reticulums, they're called, the Greys, the most common ones. This is what E.T. was based on. This is what the majority of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or even Independence Day to a degree. And according to the people who claim to have seen them, they're between 3 and 5 feet tall. They've got this huge circular head, too big for a very slim neck, and oversized black eyes. Despite having a mouth, pretty much everybody says they speak telepathically with one another. And they have a genetically engineered worker race, kind of like how bees have worker bees. They've got a type of worker controlled by the tall greys. The short greys seem to be the workers of the colony. And their telepathic abilities, obviously, would be able to help them control us, maybe. They're also responsible for creating a hybrid race. They've had sex with people on Earth to create a new type of person, half alien, half human. Then there's the tall greys. They're the superiors, supposedly. Not quite as long a neck, smaller head, still big eyes, very small nostrils, downturned mouth. Now, they can stand between 7 and 10 feet tall. The Grey Masters, some people call them. And it is believed that these are the people who've had direct communication with our military forces. A lot of people believe they come from the constellation of Orion. The tall greys apparently supervise all abductions. They're the ones responsible for experiments on human beings and people from other planets. But they prefer to employ the services of those shorter greys to do all the dirty work. An advanced race, a confident race that have little value on human life. They don't mind if you're going to be probed. If you die, you die. If you have to be left somewhere bleeding, they will leave you bleeding. There's also a race known as the Alpha-Draconians. Now, they came to Earth apparently from colonies on Alpha Draconis. Where they were before that, nobody really knows. But they're reptilian. Now, in Alien Jesus 1, we talked a lot about the reptilians. We even found how by playing what they say backwards, you can pick up a very, very different sentence. They're between 14 to 22 feet tall. Now, that's monstrous. They've got muscular bodies. They're covered in a brown or a lightish green scaly skin. Fairly intelligent, with large heads and particularly reptilian eyes. Some people have said they've got tails, others say they've got wings. Nobody really knows. But apparently, they're the force trying to repress humanity. They're clairvoyant, they're clever, in fact, they're quite sinister. And they are the first intelligent species to evolve anywhere in a Milky Way galaxy. They want to compete, they want to take over worlds, they want to populate as many worlds as they possibly can. They have immense egos and they believe themselves the rightful rulers of all planets, including Earth. They exploit the human race because they believe we're an inferior species. Problem is, now we've got native reptilians that are native to Earth. Now, these are people who look like us, walk like us, dress like us, yet they hold positions of power. Premiers, some believe presidents, queens, kings of society. They manipulate the elite. They rule our institutions. They take charge of our organizations. They've built a huge financial system, and they influence directly every religion on the planet. An underground reptilian race is said to control the media and all media corporations. So why am I telling you this? Am I telling you this because I know it for myself? They are behind most crimes against humanity. And then, probably the most famous of all the aliens, the Anunnaki, an amazing race from another galaxy that they call Ilion. Their home world was called Risk, and when that was destroyed, they built an intergalactic vessel, a spaceship, to get them off the planet, called Nibiru. Now, before coming to Earth, they colonized a whole batch of planets in and around the Orion star system, and they came to Earth close to 1 million years ago. They came down here for minerals. They came down here to see what the planet had to offer, how it would benefit them as a growing society. Minerals that were scarce in the universe, but all over the place down here. In need of a workforce, they created mankind. Through genetic manipulation and in vitro fertilization, they upgraded apes to Homo sapiens. Present on Earth, they've been here all along. The Anunnaki also influence every aspect of human life. We have inherited their culture of violence and their culture of vengeance and hatred. It's tagged in our DNA because it's partly their DNA. So when you see people fighting, it's normal, it's natural, but it comes from them. They are in direct competition with the Draconians for control over you, over me, and over every other person who lives on Earth today. Now, those people that back in the day, the Native Americans of this part of Florida, this incredible vision from above that landed here and has lived here for 1 million years, they take control, they rule, they teach, they educate, they crossbreed. This is not just a them and us. We are them too. For our relatives way, way back in history, interbred. And now we're this multicolored alien race living on this planet. But our home, way, way, way back, our true home isn't here. It's on the other side of a galaxy, on a star or on a planet that none of us will likely see in our lifetime. We are far from home. It's the Night Owls from Florida.
Miami, January 3rd, 1979. Filiberto Cardenas is driving with 3 friends when his car engine fails. He gets out to check under the hood. Suddenly, a massive UFO appears over the car. The passengers watch in horror as it shines a blinding beam of light at Cardenas, pulling him inside. The UFO then vanishes, taking the terrified motorist with it. 2 hours later, Cardenas is found by a police officer 16 miles from the abduction site. But according to the victim, he had traveled much farther. Cardenas reports the craft was manned by 3 human-like aliens. who flew him to a rocky stretch of coast, which opened into an undersea tunnel. The alien spoke Spanish, warning Cardenas of future wars and disasters that will threaten humanity. At the end of the tunnel, the UFO arrived at a massive underwater city. There, Cardenas met another human abductee who claimed to have been living with the aliens for years. Cardenas claims the aliens then conducted a series of medical experiments on him. A later physical examination reveals over 100 needle marks on his body. Not long after his abduction, Cardenas begins to suffer from a litany of strange afflictions. His body experiences extreme temperature changes, causing him to sweat profusely, and nothing can quench his endless thirst. Worst of all, he suffers terrifying memory loss that leaves him wondering what is real and what is the work of his alien abductors.
Now, one man who seems to have dedicated his whole life to the hunting of UFOs, it's Russ Kellett. Hello, Russ.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Good to talk to you. What got you into all of this in the first place, then?
A journey home. One night, I had a close encounter. I had missing time. I had facial burns, burns on my hands as well. And that was the start of it, seeing a lot of UFOs after that time. And then it progressed, seeing these strange creatures and having what appeared to be like shadows come through my bedroom wall and communicate with me and then leave the same way back through the bedroom wall. And basically I was talking to a friend about this, thinking I was going crazy, and he said, look, there's a number of books that he's read, and he said that he thought I should read into this subject of UFOs, flying saucers, and alien abductions.
It does sound to the skeptic, where's the jacket, let's lock this man away.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. And of course I started researching this, trying to find answers, going out on sky watchers and actually filming with my team some of the best footage that's ever been taken anywhere around the world, to be honest.
So really it seems the secret to this isn't really a secret, is if you look for it, it's there to be found then?
To be quite honest, I wasn't looking at first. Like I said, this happened to me on a journey home one evening from, I'd been in a bike club and I'd gone to a pub to see somebody about a job that needed doing on my bike. And this is where it all started from. So I wasn't even looking. I was too busy having fun with my biker brothers and, riding choppers and parties.
But hang on, you lost some time on the way back. Where were you when you found yourself again?
Right, well, basically what happened was I was at a railway, a level crossing, and I was waiting for I could see these red lights coming down, so I slowed down, thinking that it was the level crossing, the actual barriers coming down. So I'm sat there waiting for a train to pass. There's a bright light all around me. I thought it was a vehicle behind me, getting a bit too close for comfort, so I looked round. And basically there was no truck there, no wagon. And I mean, it was a massive light, and I'm thinking to myself, that's strange. And then when I looked off my petrol tank, I could see the reflection was coming from the sky downwards. So I looked up and I felt like I was floating and all this type of thing. Then the next thing I realised that the lights were more or less, the red lights had gone back up, like the barriers. I was sat there with a bit of a bump. And sort of like I came around as if I'd been asleep, sort of thing. Right. The air was in me. I had an half-face helmet, so the breeze was in my face and what have you. And I thought I'd better start my journey home. So, I had work in the morning. So on my way home, there was this. I can only describe it as a big ball of light followed me for miles and miles, and then basically it shot in front of me. and took off into the sky, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, something at the side of the road going over edges and around buildings and over trees, and then it just shot right in front of the road. And so I pulled over, and sort of like, I used to smoke, I had a cig, and it was only cigs, by the way. Right. And I'm sat watching this craft go over towards Halifax, a place called Halifax.
Yeah.
So then I thought, right, I better move myself, get back home. So I'm coming to my home, and I see my house all in darkness, which is a bit strange because everybody's usually up, and I didn't think it was too late because it was a work day next morning. So I gets in. The next morning, I'm awoken by my mum shouting, "Come on, I don't know why you get in late and whatever when you know there's work." So gets up, gets to work, and only just got through the door, and one of the lasses started laughing, and she said, "Have you seen your face?" And I said, "Have you seen yours?" And she said, "No, seriously." She said, "What have you done with it?" So took my crash helmet off, and it was an half-face crash helmet, and you could see that I had a sunburn. It looked like a sunburn anyway. It wasn't a sunburn, but, and the back of my hands and my neck. And so this had happened, I presume, when I was sat at the level crossing.
Yeah.
Like I say, so that was the start of things. Then I was with my girlfriend, cutting through a cemetery with a few of us mates, and this creature basically came behind me, and everybody ran. I was left behind. My girlfriend looked around, and she said that this thing had taken me, and I'd gone for about 45 minutes, and she was crying, and basically I ended up back in the cricket ground just off of the estate where we lived. And she said, "Where have you been? And what was that thing behind you?" It was like, this big creature type, thing. So again, that was another...
you must have seen this creature, presumably an alien, we think.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. What did it look like then?
Have you ever seen the film Nosferatu?
Yes, of course.
Well, it was like that. About quite big.
Bald?
Pointed it. Just like Nosferatu.
Right.
But muscly and... But then those others that have come and taken me, again, this sounds crazy, some of these are like 10 foot tall, and they all look the same, like Nosferatu, sort of like...
It's not a good look to come for your mind, is it? My goodness. Because he was the first real depiction of horror in any kind of movie. Bald head, very, very tall, long, thin fingers.
Yeah. These things wore like some kind of tight jumpsuit with an emblem on, and communicated, you could say, like telepathically in some ways, but they can actually talk.
Were you on a ship with them?
Well, I've never actually felt like I've ever been on a ship, but I felt like I've been in a base.
Right.
But the thing is, I remember that this is where it all starts getting really strange, because one of the first things I remember was being in a room with a checkerboard floor with two pillars, one at each side, with like these big balls of light on top.
Right.
And all these creatures, really tall creatures all around, and they were sort of like wearing like helmets and cloaks and stuff, like knights.
Uh-huh.
Knights of old, like Templars.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that, and sort of like floating, sort of like in the middle where these balls of light was, in the middle of these two pillars.
Wow. And you were floating, though? You weren't on a table of any kind?
No, nothing like that. No anal probing, no tables, no nothing like anything that you've heard before.
Any smells? Any other senses tweaked?
Yeah, sort of like... it smelled a bit like incense burning, that type of thing. This is, even now, when I used to ride me bike, sort of like you get that smelling, that burning sensation smell just after summer when, leaves are burning, that type of thing. And that always brings back this memory.
Right. Now, you've come on such a long way and you've done a lot of hunting. To the skeptic, what is the best proof that you've ever come across? Other than, of course, personal witness is probably the best, but other than your own experiences, what has been the most vivid piece of proof that you could use to prove to a skeptic that aliens have visited here?
Well, I've worked on quite a few cases. One of them was the Berwyn Mountains case, and getting letters, writing off and saying that, sorry, we have no information and no letters. And then, sort of like 2 years down the line, finding out, yes, that not only was there letters, there was a heck of a lot of letters about this. And then proof that there was an operation going on the night of this famous UFO encounter and landing in North Wales at the Berwyn Mountains,
right.
Where they'd been using photo flash bombs, which are used to actually illuminate the night sky for ground troops and underwater vessels like submarines and what have you.
Right.
And this was happening right at the time and the day when a group of men said that there was actually minesweeping the Irish Sea for these craft, and basically they brought, I think it was 3 out of the sea because they'd exploded these depth charges and mines. And lo and behold, the very same day, we're told in the Irish Sea that they're letting off these photo flash bombs
right.
to illuminate. Well, is that a coincidence? The best evidence, I would say, my video footage from myself and my group, where we've got dogfights over Skipsea, we've got flying triangles coming out of Filey Bay. We've got a landed flying saucer in Scarborough. There's me being hit with 5 balls of light when I'm filming a UFO. And the thing is, at that time, I used to employ somebody to look at video footage and evidence what we had.
Right.
Who was was part of the Expert Witness Association. So, he's the kind of person that goes to court, and can put people away on,
Sure.
with his evidence.
Right.
And, he looked at a lot of my footage, and most of the time it was a case of, we don't know what it is, we can tell you what it isn't, it's not an aircraft, not a balloon or anything like that. And the thing is, we already knew this, being the people that had actually filmed being behind the video cameras. So we knew we won't be filming nothing. So we're going to be showing this at our conference on the 18th of July in Filey.
Right.
The Flying Saucers Have Landed conference. And we've got Larry Warren from Rendlesham Forest,
right.
co-author of the book Left at East Gate. He's going to be giving a talk about his encounter on the night when he was there at Rendlesham Forest and came across these craft and creatures. So we've got other people going to be there as well, like Steve Mera, Nigel Wright, Sue Farah, an abductee,
right.
Steve Lumley, and myself talking about our experiences.
No, it's amazing, and we're so glad we got in touch with you. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're with Alan Robson, out and about again, and this is really quite something, because I'm at a place that, to be quite honest, I never thought I would ever visit, because it's a different world. If you're wondering precisely where I am, it's a very, very beautiful part of France, and it's a part of France that if you are used to going to places like Paris or Boulogne or Calais, you would never come across it. There's a place just up the road called Montignac. It's a beautiful little village on the Vézère River. It's famous for one thing, and it is that thing that we're going to be doing tonight. Caves that stretch directly beneath the town. Now, as you know, we are fascinated by anything that is different. And yet, I'm going to take you back tonight 19,000 years ago. The paintings in these caves were put onto the wall 19,000 years ago. Now we're actually going into Lascar 2 because these caves are an exact copy of the prehistoric paintings contained in the original Lascar Caves that are 200 meters away. The techniques have been used for the copies in exactly the same way as the originals were made. It's an amazing story because these caves that are approximately like 100 feet ahead from where I am now, I'm just actually in the car park. If you hear the odd car go by, you will know the score. The Lascar Caves, the originals, were discovered in 1940. A group of teenagers were looking for a lost puppy dog, and they ended up in these amazing caves. So by the time the war had ended, because you remember that they were slap bang in the middle of the war at the time, at the end of the Second World War, they opened the caves to the public, and everybody went crazy for the incredible things that they saw there. But because the paintings were such a success and so many hundreds of thousand people waded along these corridors, the breadth of the visitors started affecting the paintings, and some of them were running and some of them were being damaged. So what they've done now is they've closed the whole thing off. An ongoing attempts to restore and preserve the paintings continued as they have for decades, but it seems unlikely that the original Lascar paintings will be open to the public anytime soon. Probably never. They've actually hermetically sealed the caves, so now only a very few scientists, all wearing masks, can enter. It's a bit of a shame, but I kind of understand it, because the things that are in here are so incredible, and they may well point a finger of proof towards the fact that we have been, if not invaded, certainly visited by people or creatures from other planets. This site that I'm standing on is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's quite amazing. So, leaving the darkness of late evening France, we're going to take a walk into the Lascar Caves. There's all kinds of things in here. The star map that's said to give insight into our ancestors' minds. A prehistoric map of the night sky that was discovered on the walls of the caves here. And yet, it's completely accurate. Without telescopes, all those years ago, how could they possibly know what planets had how many suns and how many moons? It's ridiculous to think it could be anything other than travellers from beyond. Now, first of all, we go down about 20 steps to the bottom of a platform where there is stone on either side, and as soon as you first get into the caves, it sort of opens up and you realise that even just using a torch in this echoey, dungeon-esque kind of atmosphere, that you see that some rock is quite bright and illuminated by the torches, and as you move along, the darkness swallows behind you as you look up at the ceiling and you see the strange gnarls and stalagmites and stalactites. And the very first pictures that I've come across now on my left-hand side are those of what looks like elk and buffalo. And there's little small flies flying around, and I've just got a couple up my nose and one in my mouth there. Oh, that was really unpleasant. Little tiny white sort of... Oh, that really was not nice. But I must say, the entire, from floor to ceiling, you can see these incredible murals on the wall in browns and yellows, and you see things that look like oxen, you see others that look maybe like primitive horses, and others like some strange elk-like creature that you might see on the African plains with long horns spreading out behind it. As you look across the ceiling at the 1,000 different colours of browns and white and marbling, and it's an amazing thing. And as you can tell, the echo is really quite amazing in here. And every now and then you'll hear a little drop of water falling from the ceiling. I hope that's not off my breath. I don't want to damage any of the paintings that are in here, because this really is, it opens into this huge cavernous thing, and as you go in, you think you've seen everything, and then you just look up on the ceiling and there's a bird, or there's another cattle-esque picture of some beast. Also to my right-hand side, there is a hand, a human hand has been painted. And this was common practice in a lot of the prehistoric sites. What would happen is a cave painter would chew on really bright red berries and then just spit, kind of like blurt out the paint over his own hand, leaving his mark forever. Leaving his mark, this one here, leaving his mark for 19,000 years. Am I able to do this? Yeah, my guide says that I can. I'm going to put my hand on exactly the place where prehistoric man put his hand 19,000 years ago. Oh, the rock feels cold. And yet, strangely, we're linked over the centuries. 19,000 years ago, right here, there was a caveman doing precisely what I'm doing now. It makes you feel at one with the history of a place like this. Absolutely amazing. And all around us there are other additional things, apart from the map of the prehistoric cosmos that's in the Lascar Caves. There is a map thought to date back 16,500 years. The numbers are so big it's hard to get your head around them. And it shows 3 bright stars that we know today as the Summer Triangle. There's also a map of a star cluster that nobody can see from Earth without the most powerful telescope. It's the map of the Pleiades star cluster. It's here, among the Lascar frescoes. There's also another pattern of stars that was put down 14,000 years ago. Isn't this just amazing that century after century other people would come into these caves and not just admire the amazing painting, but add to them too. And here in front of me now, beside what looks like a buffalo and a long-legged bird that could be a flamingo, there's a long stretched out body of something that is not like a man. It's almost like a man, but instead of feet, he has a spike beneath him. And his head looks strange, and there's a circular sort of drawing on the top of it that could well be a space helmet. A lot of people believe that Lascar is not just a place, like a sort of a prehistoric art gallery where the people of the day would come in and draw things. A lot of people believe that I am in the world's first planetarium. This is the place where scientists are now beginning to agree is the place where the stars were first charted. From 1940, when this was found, the drawings have demonstrated immense and incredible prehistoric knowledge of the stars. Knowledge that they should not certainly have had. And how could they have had? So why am I here? Well, if this was the very first planetarium, a prehistoric planetarium. Was this one of the first places where people who had travelled from the stars had visited? How else could the people that painted these incredibly complex entire star systems, entire constellations on the wall, how else could they know that information? Maybe they'd been there. Alan Robson in Lascar Caves in the rather beautiful middle of France. Now, talking about this subject is the most fascinating thing, because you're never sure, and maybe it's the way that it's designed is we never will be sure. But there's been a general feeling that something is coming our way, something's going to be released, something is going to come out of the blue to surprise the entire world. Well, I'm very fortunate. I've got Richard Hoffman, who is the Deputy Director of Investigations from MUFON, MUFON's Star Team Manager and Alabama State Director. Blimey, his door must be 3 meters long. Hello, Richard.
How are you today?
I'm very, very well. Looking forward to talking to you. Now, I've had a look at your website, and my goodness, it is one of the most comprehensive things I have ever seen. What got you involved with this?
Well, I started at age 13. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, which is where actually the Air Force Project Blue Book was located.
Right.
And I was 13-year-old, very impressive. I was late for a class in science book report. Had on the only available topic that was left on a sheet where everybody signed up was on UFOs, and I said, well, I'll put my name next to it. And after class, I went out and talked with my science teacher and said, what's a UFO? And he explained it's a flying saucer and, that type of thing. And basically I got started looking into it. I really didn't think much about it at the time. In fact, I did so poorly with the book report that I actually got a D on the report, which is not very good.
No.
And then that evening, I went home and heard a news story about a landing case in Socorro, New Mexico, Juan Zamora. That was April 24th, 1964. And from that point on, when I heard that and how the fact that there was evidence there to indicate that something had landed, and then when I started doing a little bit more digging into it, and I found out that Project Blue Book was right just up the street from me, and I started to see that they were treating it seriously. I said, well, I'm into it too, and I started getting books and literature, and a short time later I was on public television and everything else, and the next thing you know is it propelled it even further, and so I've been doing it now for, I think it's going to be 51 years.
My goodness.
That I've been investigating and researching this subject. So, yeah, I've been at it for a while.
Right. Well, we need to ask you some just very clear, straightforward questions. We've seen an awful lot on the internet about people claiming to have secret battles beneath the sand in America and special agents being killed, and we've heard an awful lot of these kind of things. Quite simply, your belief in aliens, yes or no? How certain are you now that you've had 51 years to look into it?
So, what I've done is I basically have looked at it from a lot of different angles. I've investigated probably easily 1,000 cases right now.
Right.
To the point where I've, when you're going out in the field and you're actually talking to witnesses and you go look and you dig into it and then you try to research what can you find to account for this, and then you can't find anything and you're scratching your head. You're left with the fact that there's something there. I mean, there's nothing that can explain what the witnesses just got through telling you.
Right.
Or you might find some sort of indications that it was there. You might find physical effects on the ground. And we find physical effects on trees. We find it on the ground. We find it electromagnetic effects. We find microwave kind of radiation backgrounds. We find a whole variety of things. When we begin to go look at it, we say, well, wait a minute. There's nothing that I know that could produce that.
Right.
And so over the years, you start to find out it's a worldwide phenomena. It's been seen in every culture on the planet. It's been seen, and they pretty much describe them the same way, very similar. They seem to be silent. They maneuver around. And then you talk with, I gave a lecture to the Air Force on UFOs at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
And I'll have pilots and people who come up and knock at your door and basically tell you that incredible story, like that their job was to go up in an aircraft and actually film the object and try to see if they could chase it and then bring the film back, and it was like analyzed and they were told to shut up about it. Or you might run across situations where you'll talk to a whole variety of other people about the phenomena, and they tell you, well, I was, on board such and such a ship, and I watched and I saw an object, and in fact the whole crew saw it. That type of thing.
Wow.
And so there's an incredible phenomenon out there, very serious phenomena. We don't understand it. We don't really truly understand where it's coming from. There is a lot of evidence out there. Even if you look at just the frigging documents that are out there on the internet from the military and the government, you see how seriously it was treated by them. And you say, well, there's something obviously that they found, and just the way that they treat it, and very, very quiet. So, yes, there's something to it. There's incredible cases, and people just have to learn about it and study it like I did and pick up a book and read.
For sure.
You'll find out that there's incredible stuff.
It just seems, though, that if it is as common knowledge as it seems to be, people in the military saying, and how many times have we heard, well, I took it to my superior officer and I didn't hear anything else about it. Everything was kept quiet and hushed up. If it is that kind of common knowledge, it can't frighten us now because we've heard it all before. Why do you think they're keeping all of this under wraps still?
Well, it's the nature of the military. I mean, you put something in the military, they're a secret organization, right? I mean, it's not like they have any responsibility to tell anybody because it's all for defense purposes. And the nature of the defense is to have an advantage over another person, or a country, another whatever, aggressor. And so the nature of having it in the military is from the very get-go, putting it into a secret classification, and it's going to be used for intelligence purposes. And if you take a look at what every conquering nation has done, what do the militaries do? They take over and they find out what technology that there is. They strip it, they use it for themselves, and then they take it from there. So what would be the logical conclusion is, they've been looking to figure out how that they can build them, use the technology to advance their purposes. So you see stealth technology coming up. You see aircraft now designed that are starting to look like unusual shaped objects that are pretty much, like them.
Right.
And you start to see, invisibility tests and everything else. So, I mean, that's what you've got. You've got basically us using it in the military for our purposes and then wanting to play it all down and keep it shush-hush. And what military wants to say that they're not in control of their sky?
Talking about actually, and again, you can go back through some sensational films that have been made about it, but one that kind of struck a chord with a lot of people in Britain was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where an awful lot of people said something like that happened to me here in Britain. And I know in America you've got this amazing number of people who claim to have either been abducted by aliens or pursued by aliens or whatever. Have you met anybody that you are pretty certain is absolutely telling the truth who's had such an experience?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, there's quite a number of very, very solid cases where you've got additional evidence that supports and backs up their story.
Right.
For example, even if you look at Betty and Barney Hill case in 1961, which kind of triggered a lot of the fuel for the abduction scenario. Well, you've got radar of tracking of an object at the time. You've got the physical evidence in the form of things like torn dress, and you've got shoes that are scuffed, and you've got some interesting. And so we have cases like that where you've got additional supportive evidence. There's a gentleman by the name of Tom Reed, for example, out of Kentucky, and his case, along with his brother, and actually his whole family, have been abducted. And there's a lot of background testimony and evidence that supports the story.
Right.
And so, yes, and I investigated, there was a case up in Kentucky many, many years ago that was involving 3 women who the whole car was lifted up into the object, and you go through and you actually do the check independently on them and their story, and you start to find out that there's something to it. So what I'm going to tell you is that when you have these stories, and the more it gets on the media and everything else, the next thing you know is every person who's got a bump or a bruise on their arm is now coming up and saying, "Well, I was abducted."
Right? Yeah.
And so the problem that we have in ufology is to sort out, if you would, the wheat from the chaff, and try to figure out what is the wheat or the signal from the noise. And so, there are people you have to look at that obviously do have psychological problems. There's sleep pattern issues or problems that people have with sleep disorders that can actually create that. There was a study that was done to find out that certain breathing patterns by Dr. Stanislav Grof called holotropic breathing. And if you do that exercise, a lot of those people reported to have very much the same kind of experience. And so we have to go through and basically digest and sort out which of those is real. We find out that there's probably similar to UFOs, there's about an 80 to 20% ratio, that somewhere between 10 to 20%, maybe or something of that nature, tend to be the solid ones we can't identify. And the rest of them are all the knowns and these are obviously not abductions.
Right.
So that's what our challenge is as investigators.
Now, occasionally you'll see, certainly on the internet, lots of meetings of ex-NASA individuals having conversations, and I've seen many where people are listing the 10 different types of alien that they're supposed to be, and how they're in various parts of the world they are living underground. Other people have said there's 2 or 3 types of alien that look just like us that could pass us in the street and we wouldn't know. What's your view on all of that kind of thing?
All right, so, let's put it this way. I tend to be one of those people where when I do research, I do research about the actual unknowns. In other words, I only trust data that is one of those things that's been investigated and verified, right?
Gotcha.
The problem we have is quite often is that there's everybody in the world who doesn't wants to put a book together, write an article or whatever, that are not. They're going and getting anecdotal stories from people.
Right.
All right. So in other words, and they're not verified. They haven't been investigated. And so, consequently, it's like me trying to say, let me talk to you about what UFOs do. They flap their wings, they have beaks and everything else, because guess what? I've included in birds into my mix, right? So the problem that I've got is people to try to deduce what the number or the population or the types of aliens there are, and they then come along and make these incredible stories like that there's 40 different versions of aliens, and granted, there's variations that because people's descriptions are wrong or somebody hasn't got the artistry right or something of that nature, and so we now deduce that there's all. Let me tell you, the vast majority of UFO sightings don't even have pilots in them. They're like our UAVs.
Right.
They're unpiloted, and so. And then the other thing is, when you look at UFO reports, when you actually look at here's a landed UFO, and you see what the beings do, is they tend to be the type that scurry back into the craft, and they don't even come out, and they don't even cough to you.
Right.
And then you look at the abduction cases, where there's people having, regression, hypnosis, and everything else, which I question. Right. And now they're starting to describe all these different forms of variation. So I don't buy most of that stuff.
Right.
And I think that's extrapolating data that's not been verified and validated.
Right.
And so, I'm sorry, I don't go there.
Right. No, I'm just wondered what your view, because there's a lot of it out there. There's a ton of stuff.
Oh, sure.
Of that kind. Here in Britain, we've got some very famous stories that have that proof attached to them: the burning of trees and markings on the ground, and captured on radar, chased by aeroplanes. Why is it then that governments internationally, instead of saying, look, if we find an alien plane, we're going to reverse technology it, we're going to scrape all of the info that we can make use of, they are out there, it's not that common that you'll see them necessarily, but they are there, we're not alone in the universe. You don't have to be a military man keeping a secret to at least admit that, but they never have.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to there early on decisions that were made to basically. Let me give you an example. In the United States, and I'm sure that similar thing for Britain. There are a lot of times that they compare notes. I'm sure between militaries and so on and so forth. If you look at the Freedom of Information Act, all countries use that as a means of being able to control their data, right? Mm-hmm. So they're released.
Right.
So ultimately what you have is that early on, there was obviously an awareness that these things outmaneuver us, that they're... in fact, there was a policy that the Air Force had here where it was initially shoot them out of the skies, we don't know what they are, take them down, and then there was a sudden change in that policy to revert to don't shoot but intercept. And then you start to find out that well, obviously there if you take a look at all the encounters where we fired on them, that the bullets basically just were absorbed or something like that. They looked as though that they were having no effect on the craft. They were like it was going into a field, and then somehow the field around it was disrupting the bullets' maneuver. Right. Anyway, the bottom line is that there's some sort of technology that allows them to deflect or absorb the bullets and stuff.
Wow.
So we can't shoot them. They maneuver faster than us. We've studied it. We've looked at them. We've set up planes and taken photographs of them. There are definitely technologies way beyond us. If there's any kind of crashes that happen, obviously we also would know that too, right?
Sure.
So the bottom line is that the story is that it's in the military. We need to figure it out. We need to keep quiet about it. We're not going to talk about it. Mm. And then you look at even in 1953, you have a CIA Robertson panel report that basically said, look, the public is getting too wound up about UFOs. We need to calm them down. We need to use the media to be able to help to do it. We need to be able to get a story. We need to work to close the Project Blue Book so that we show that there's nothing to this phenomena. Mm. And so governments started moving toward that type of strategy. Let's keep it quiet. Let's shut up about it. Well, let's dismiss it because we don't want that. In fact, if you look at the United States here, you start to see that the CIA infiltrated these things called tabloids. Mm. And we're starting to make it look like they need to mock them. They would show pictures of aliens shaking hands with President Carter or or something of that nature. So there was a whole movement to be able to shut it down, keep people distracted. There's been probably psyops operations that are basically out trying to dissuade and make it look like it's a joke and there's nothing to it. Yeah. And all the while to keep the whole thing secret and to keep it, in the background, and to get it off of the conscious minds of the general public, and yet here are phenomena that everybody sees and reports consistently. And apparently, if you look at their behavior, they don't tend to be hostile because they had plenty of opportunity over centuries to do that, right?
Sure.
So there's an observation. So there's some sort of an agreement. We monitor them, we track them, we see them on the planet, we know that they're there. We're probably, the intel worlds are out there tracking them. There's nothing that they can do about it. They've tried to do something about it. They've decided to let them be, and here we are. And so that's kind of like what I see after my 51 years, is just that we just accept them. They're there. They don't seem to be doing too much harm to people, if you would, or we've agreed to let them do that or something of that nature. And that's still the policy of the governments that we live in.
So do you believe that there has actually possibly been an agreement between the powers that be with an alien race? So there's been a meeting between the two?
Oh, I do. I mean, I do believe that there has been some sort of a meeting where that took place. I mean, there's rumors to that effect. There's rumors to the effect that even at Roswell, for example, there was a live being. There's been some sort of maybe telepathic communication between the two of them, and that's what we seem to always get about the alien forms that are on it, on board the craft. And so, there's been exchanges back and forth in some remote locations of the military and deep, dark, whatever. Wow. And there's enough of these crashes that have happened to where, sure. And so there's I believe very strongly that there's been these exchanges and that they've taken place.
And we must look like an ant farm to them, though, don't we?
We look like a what? I'm sorry.
An ant farm. Are they, because they're looking at us. Their technology is way off the map. It would make you wonder, why would they bother?
Well, let me pose let me share a little different idea with you. If you look throughout recorded history, you see that these objects have been around.
Absolutely.
Okay? So they've always been here. We've had a relationship with them in every culture throughout just about every period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, even Indian tribes here in the United States have, that same thing. So bottom line is we've had this, relationship that exists between us and them for a very, very long time. How much they have tried to influence or shape our directions is undetermined, but we believe that there's probably some sort of influencing going on.
Sure.
And so, for the most part, I think what we have here is a situation where these beings have been on this planet for a very, very long time. And it's quite conceivable that they may have been here before us. It's conceivable that there are other explanations other than the fact that they have to be coming from another planet somewhere else. They could have been moving through time, through space. There could be a lot of different. And if you look at the reports we have, there's a variety of hypotheses that are associated with them that are all equally compelling. And we don't know which of those is the most valid hypothesis. For example, some objects seem to materialize and dematerialize. Well, does that mean that they're moving through space and time? Could be. Could that also account for some other interesting mysteries around the planet, such as why is it that we can't find a Bigfoot at the sign or after a major disaster and find a body of them after a hurricane hits in an area where they are?
Right.
And wouldn't you expect to see some sort of body after all this time?
Sure.
You don't.
Right.
So are they walking, along and they somehow enter into another space and time? Are they from a different space and time? So objects disappearing or doing the same thing. Then there's some aspects of the phenomena that seem to be like that they're solid. They have physical effects, that they land, they're nuts and bolts. Are those coming from a different place? If you look at the Rendlesham case over in the UK, Waters, in 1980, you have those witnesses talking about, at least one of them, Tennyson, is talking about the fact that he believes that the object gave a message when he touched it, and it's now telling him that basically that this is a us from the future that are coming back, and that these are us and our technology moving through time.
Right.
So you have a variety of competing hypotheses. It could be all of them, or it could be one or two.
Right.
And yeah, exactly.
These are the fascinations that keep people like you and I chasing.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Hey, Richard Hoffman, you are an absolute superstar. Thank you very much for talking to us. We appreciate it so much. And it's interesting because I would say the majority of people who listen to the show that I do, the majority believe that there are UFOs. When again, as we are, we're not sure where they come from. We're not sure whether they're traveling through space or time or zipping through a wormhole. But as long as we keep saying them, this is going to be one of the great fascinations. Do you think that at any point, because we felt here in Britain that there was becoming so many stories being released one after the other, that we were almost building up to something, as if finally someone's going to tell us the truth, or we're physically going to be able to see one. Do you get the same feeling in the States, or is it just over here?
So, there's a lot of people that have that belief. I felt that way in 1973. Yeah, exactly. In 1973, we had a major flap, a large concentration of sightings that swept across the country,
right.
And I thought, wow, this is going to be it. We're gonna get them to come forward and say that there's something here, because look at how many of these things.
Sure.
Well, then you look at the actual cases and you find out, a different story. You find out that the ones who investigate, that there's a large number of them that are misidentifications. People out watching the planet Venus Yeah. I went out on a case where I got 30 people pointing to the sky, and they're pointing to the planet Venus. So there was a heightened state of awareness and interest, and the next thing you know, anything that was moving across the sky was a UFO.
Right. No, I get it.
Okay, UFOs don't conform to that type of thing. Okay,
sure.
And if you look at the actual UFO, you find out it's a very rare experience.
No, for sure.
What do we have going on in our skies right now? We have an increased number of drones people are popping up in the skies. I don't know if you have them over in the UK, but we have a large number of people who are launching sky lanterns, Chinese sky lanterns,
absolutely,
yes. Memorial services. And so now you've got more of those things that are up in the air, and then you look at the aircraft that are up that are like really strange, triangular-shaped objects, and you say, well, wait a minute, how much of that that stuff is really the UFO? And that's where you have to do the investigation and find out, look at it, and then see if there's really, truly an increase in the number of UFOs or the number of people seeing strange things in the skies.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
You're a thorough man. You're a thorough man, Richard Hoffman. We wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you very much for talking to us. I do so appreciate it.
Oh, well, glad to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to my trip. Next week I'm going to be over in the British Isles. I'll be over in Ireland for right now, but I want to get over to the UK as well. So
well, bless you.
Take care, and thank you, and thank you, sir. And
good
luck on your chase, just like me.
Have a Guinness on me. Thank you, man.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Hello. I hope you can actually hear me. Bye. This is loud, and I am very, very hot. Alan Robson with you. Now, at the present moment, I am flying in a very, very, very broken down and rickety helicopter that apparently once used to be used by the drug enforcement people here in South America. But I'm in Peru, and I'm looking down, or I'm heading certainly, towards a place that's one of the most famous places in the world. Famous because of something incredible that will soon be directly beneath me. Now, I don't know whether you've ever heard of a thing called the Nazca Lines. They're one of the most recognizable images of Peru. And if ever you should travel in this direction, it is something that you have to see. The Nazca Lines, they're huge drawings on the floor of the Nazca Desert, located to the southwest of Peru. Covers an area, when you think, oh, it's a drawing, how big is it? 10 feet? 20 feet? How big can a drawing possibly be? The drawings that I'm about to show you cover an area of 520 kilometers between two towns, Nazca and also Palpa. The lanes were rediscovered in 1939, and a lot of people believe they were created between 200 BC and 700 AD by the native people of Nazca. Now, there's all kinds of things being seen here. Some of the lanes are over 6 miles in length, and they are absolutely straight. Now, to be able to do that would take natives an inaudible amount of time to carve into the rock of mountaintops, something 6 miles long. Complicated drawings of monkeys and birds and spiders and hummingbirds, lizards, reptiles, and fish, all on a desert floor, but carved so deeply that all of those years later, 2,200 years later, they're still here, as clear as day. But Jorge at the present moment has just tipped me the wink that we are heading very, very close to the Nazca Lines right now. And there is my first glimpse of the Nazcas. Oh my goodness, nothing in my life could have prepared me for this. You hear about, they've done some amazing drawings on the desert floor. Directly ahead of me at the present time it just looks like a huge road system that somebody has put together. Right angles, a huge road that is probably 3 3 times the width of a landing strip that suddenly turns at a right angle, and you see more lanes going off into the distance as far as the eye can see. I mentioned that it covers 520 kilometers. We're not going to be able to see all of that, but what I see, I'm going to be telling you about. So close your eyes, let me describe this for you. Absolutely incredible. Using simple tools. How could they have done this? I mean, the most sophisticated surveyors on the planet would be hard-pressed to recreate something like this. What they seem to have done is they've actually moved away the desert floor to remove iron oxide-coated pebbles that covered the surface, to reveal lightly coloured earth underneath to give you the contrast of the lanes. Now, I must admit, the temperature today has been in the middle 80s, and inside this very chuggy helicopter, it's a damn sight hotter. So, 700 lanes and shapes in the desert, geometric patterns, drawings of creatures that are completely in scale, that can only actually be seen from above. If you're down walking along the ground, you can't see any of these. The scale of them is so incredible and gigantic. And I don't know whether you're aware, but to my left-hand side, just outside the helicopter window, I can see a small plane that's obviously one of the many tours, the little small plane tours that run over the lanes every single day. From the ground, it looks like a little bit of ground has been scratched, and yet to do 50 yards would take a couple of people more than a day. So how could they possibly have done 520 kilometers worth of this? And oh, we're swinging to my stomach, swinging as well. Beginning to wish I hadn't eaten anything for breakfast this morning, because just to my left-hand side, the ground looks less brown, more kind of greeny, and there are lanes in all directions, and you can see patterns of, so I don't know what that is, but we're heading towards it now. That is the great condor. Now, one of the most famous birds in South America. It's kind of like a big vulture. It's a condor. And there in the ground beneath me, bigger than the size of a football stadium, that's how big this picture is a condor bird with its wings outstretched to the left and outstretched to the right, with a long tail streaming below. And above it, to the left-hand side, long lanes that some people said this is the place where UFOs land. It can clearly be, these pictures can clearly be seen from space. They're absolutely crystal clear from the skies. As we move across to the left-hand side, there is another strange structure. I don't know what this is supposed to be. It's a very, very strange, almost looks like a crab's arm with a pincer out, and yet behind it, it's linked to huge, almost like runways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, wide enough to be the runway where an aircraft could come down. Just below, oh, we're swinging. Whoa! Careful. Oh, dear. Keep my breakfast down, please. Oh, that was shocking. Swinging down to my right-hand side, he just suddenly turned off. There's something that looks like a huge eye, and it looks like a fish. Oh, no, it's not a fish, it's a whale. It's a massive whale with its mouth open. I can see its eyes, its 2 fins hanging down, and there is the whale's tail, that shape of a whale's tail that is unmistakable. And directly beneath it, there looks like shapes that resemble sort of like aircraft hangars, is the nearest thing that I can describe to it. But aircraft hangars for what? There's the flamingo ahead of me just now, an amazing flamingo that's been carved. I think it's the Paraguana, it's called here in Peru. Another amazing drawing of almost like a caricature of the creatures that they are drawing. Now, I think that had human beings actually carved these things, they would look far more actually like the creatures. This looks as if it's been done by another hand, but I have left the most incredible carving to last, because there, move across, straight ahead, and can you hover here? Jorge, can you stay? Can you stay here? Stay. Thank you, yes. And move, yes, just over a bit. He's moving the head of the helicopter forward. We are hovering at the present moment, directly over a spot. I hope that you can see this. It is a depiction of a spaceman. Not of an ordinary man. He is called the Spaceman. He has a circular helmet on, 2 large eyes, and he is the man from space. Now, whenever anybody talks about aliens, they talk about a huge head with eyes that are much bigger than human eyes, humanoid in shape, but different enough. Quite often in some of the prehistoric caves, you see huge boots, almost like the same kind of space boots worn by Apollo astronauts on the moon. This spaceman is wearing that kind of outfit. It's an amazing picture. And there below me, if ever there was proof that people have traveled here from other worlds, I am staring at it right now as I look into the eyes of that spaceman staring back up at me from the dead Earth. What an incredible thing to see. If you can't get here, get yourself onto a website, see what I have seen today, and you will be absolutely amazed. Alan Robson for the Night Owls, from the Nazca Lines, here in the skies over Peru.
Now, on earlier shows, we talked about a thing called reverse technology. And this is, if you find, for example, if you didn't know how a clock worked, but you had a clock, you could reverse the technology. You could take the clock apart, see how it works, and then you could build your own clock. Now, that's what they have done since the time of the Egyptians. We started the show in the Holy Land, because inside a pyramid they found a simple battery. Now, whoa, the pyramid had been closed for centuries, found under the sand in the 60s, and inside it had a battery. Where did that come from? Well, way back, they had that kind of technology. They reverse engineered it. And that's what they've done with vessels not of this earth that have come to us. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the Ministry of Defence. I'm also going to talk to you about the Royal Society. Now, the Royal Society, a group of intellectuals. And the one thing that everybody in the Royal Society agreed with was they could get their head around a thing called artificial life, which means robot technology. Now, robot technology, think about it. Imagine if it had come down with the aliens right at the very beginning. But the church wanted to keep the power, so it got rid of all of the great minds that could use that technology. And in the Middle Ages, the purga, anybody bright enough to start using technology, let's get rid of them. That's what we're talking about. We asked the Royal Society what one event convinced you of alien life. And they answered the case in the UK at Rendlesham Forest in 1980 in Suffolk between 2 military bases. It wasn't a sighting of a UFO in the sky, it was a UFO that had landed. The witnesses described a small craft. It came on a second night when military personnel were able to examine it at the landing site. They found indentations on the ground. Intelligence staff got radiation everywhere. With a Geiger counter, it was 8 times the normal level. They told Parliament There was no defense significance. But they did that with a tongue in their cheek, because you can't have a UFO land in between two military bases without there being significance to national defense. Now, one possibility would be maybe these outsiders are trying to unite all of the nations of the world. Now, that seems a little bit Marvel Comics, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? An alien coming in, the Silver Surfer arrives, just wanting peace on Earth. You know, it does sound a bit utopian. Yet, Ronald Reagan once hinted in a speech to the UN, he said, "I occasionally think how quickly we would set aside our differences across the world if we faced the alien threat from the other side." And it's true. We'd be fighting side by side with Al-Qaeda. Al-Shabaab would be shoulder to shoulder with us, fighting off this other force trying to take our planet. It's exactly the same as Northerners from Sunderland or Teesside or Northumberland being called a Geordie when abroad. When somebody's having a pop at the northeast, everybody unites together. And Ronald Reagan was right about that. So why is the government right now looking at UFO sightings? Well, first of all, there's around 300 that can be verified. Now, these are not the ones like drunk Alfie at 3 a.m. rings the police station. 300, and verification means seen by more than 20 people. There's between 200 and 300 of them every year. Now, when people reported seeing UFOs, they were capable of extraordinary maneuvers, extraordinary speeds, faster than any military jet. Now, any government would want to know about that technology. And do you think that every alien managed to travel around Earth without crashing? Well, there's never been a being in any vehicle anywhere on Earth that's ever managed that. We can crash on the corner of our own street. Somewhere else in the universe, there is other life that has visited here, and our defense scientists are desperate to try and find out how their explosive propulsion systems work so that they can cover the kind of speed. Some people talk about wormholes, how you might be able to fly into a black hole and come out the other side on the opposite end of the galaxy. Sounds very Doctor Who, but our greatest minds on planet Earth right now absolutely believe it. So what do aliens look like? On previous shows, we've heard people describe there are numerous different types, and some of them resemble us. We would pass them in the street without even knowing. Different colours. Again, interbreeding with us over the generations. They come in all shapes and sizes. Lots of different life forms. Now, there's a lot of prototype aircraft and drones and other weapons that we have right now in Britain, certainly in America, that you will never see on the news for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. You're not ever going to see them. But if we ever faced a threat from the unknown, there is kit that they already have, alien reverse technology that they can use against anything that comes to this planet to face us. Now, this is another thing that I kind of worry about. Instead of reaching out a hand of friendship, we're ready to shoot them already, using their own technology. And they've never shown us anything other than kindness. They came here originally and gave us all of their technology that the church tried to destroy and continues to try and keep away from us. We don't know if UFOs offer any kind of threat to us here on Earth. All we can say is, on all of the times they've been here before, they have helped us. Therefore, they're not on the side of the church, for those of you who still have your faith. They're on the side of the Illuminati. Whose side are you on now? Are you changing your position a little? Or are you still believing in those old men who want to have power over you? Be interesting to find out.
On Night Owls.
Broadcasting live from high atop the J.P. White Building in downtown Roswell, New Mexico. It's Mornings with Mike Winters on 106.5 Roswell's Talk FM. Is that what I sound like when I talk?
That is indeed what he sounds like when he talks. Does that give you a clue as to where I am at the present moment? Yeah, we've got up very, very early this morning to come to a place I've always wanted to visit. And finally, I'm here. I must admit, parked up after driving from Las Vegas. It's about 80 or so miles. Here I am. There's a fence in front of me. The ground around looks flat. Driven through tiny little towns where everything is alien related. Every pub is called the Ale Inn Bar, and get your alien burgers and your alien sodas, alien fresh fruit grown on Area 51, and here I am. I've just arrived. I parked at kind of an entrance area. I was there for 2 minutes, and I was moved on by a huge white utility vehicle that just bounded out of nowhere, said, "This is private land, you must move on." And I said, "Well, I'm just stopping for..." She said, "You're not stopping." Whoa. So if this has nothing to hide, what are they hiding? As I say, only been here probably 10-15 minutes, and I've had to drive a little bit further along a very bleak and empty highway that I'm sure I've seen on the front of some Eagles albums over the years. There's warnings on every sign. There's people selling alien barbecue food in pubs 3 kilometres up the road. There's even a big green sign with pictures of aliens and saying that I'm on the extraterrestrial highway. How cool is that? Well, it is cool to be here. How much can I see? How much can I tell you about? Well, that remains to be seen. Otherwise, I'm just going to be sitting in the car learning as much as I can off Roswell's very own talk station. But let's get out. Let's get to it. Because tonight, beginning in Roswell, deep in the steaming hot Nevada desert, even at this time in the morning, Alan Robson begins our next adventure, Alien Jesus 5. Now you may ask, why is it taking me till Alien Jesus 5 to come here? This very month is the 70th anniversary of those craft coming down here at Roswell. 70 years this month. Now, as I say, there's a main highway that's not very far away from the main area of Roswell. I don't know whether you can hear that motorway right in the background. It's over a batch of scrub land, and there's 1 or 2 trees around and about the place. The thing that's most interesting about it is I actually came here so that I could find out if the place was benign or not. You know, we've heard a million stories, but you think, it can't possibly be true that the aliens in there and they've operated on them and they've got a spacecraft that they've back-engineered. And I remember telling you that story in Alien Jesus 1. So I thought, to come here, I'm probably going to find that everybody welcomes you. The birds are, hello birds. American blue jays popping around on fences and what have you. And you would think, well, what are we going to do then? Will they welcome us and say, "Hi and welcome to Roswell, do you want to buy an inflatable alien or a little toy alien like everybody seems to have around about here?" And yet, the first thing I did, pull up outside, probably a side road leading in. Big, huge fences saying, "Keep out, government land, government property," all that kind of thing. And yet, the reality of it is, then this huge white all-terrain vehicle arrives, two guys, one with a shotgun. A shotgun? I'm only on my own. I mean, what possible use to point a shotgun at me? If they're trying to say we've got nothing to hide here, why would they point a shotgun at a tourist? Unbelievable. Anyway, across tonight's show, we are travelling, as always, all over the world. We're going to see quite a few things here from the United States. I've been bombing around. We're going to be talking to incredible people in my quest to prove definitively that alien life has been here. Did they come to Earth? Absolutely. Tonight, we've got an answer for you. Let's get straight to it. Are aliens contacting us? Stephen Hawking's Breakthrough Listen project is looking into bizarre light signals from 234 different stars right now. This is not just a little star twinkling in the sky miles and miles and miles away. Specifically, 234 of the stars that maybe you can see some of these late at night if you live far enough out in the countryside. And they believe absolutely that they're showing signs of alien life. Astronomers have found extraterrestrial signals that have exactly the shape of light pulses that could be produced only by alien beings. They've made controversial findings combing through 2.5 million readings. And there's a lot of people who dispute the evidence, but Stephen Hawking is absolutely positive that aliens, if they're not already here, are certainly making contact. Here's some of the noises captured by people of alien pulses being sent from space. Now think about this. This is a pulse that has to travel across the galaxy. At this moment, we, humble earthlings, have no way of replicating this or even sending it back. Believers claim that, unknown to the vast millions on Earth, that there's a vast array of extraterrestrial life forms all over our galaxy, and they've been visiting Earth for millions of years before the first Lyran ancestors of the human race colonized not just the planet, but also the moon, hence recent sightings of buildings being found on the moon. According to the ancient astronaut theory, these extraterrestrials visited Earth as gods, descending from the sky in the bright light chariots, and all of the things that we've covered so often on other Alien Jesus shows. Sophisticated flying craft that can get here, based on testimonies of highly reliable sources. Researchers, scientists, professors, and even before Canada's Parliament, they brought a government cover-up of UFO information, specifically of extraterrestrials having visited Earth in advanced spacecraft. In Parliament, they talked about Syrians, not spelled S-Y like the Syria that we have, S-I-R, from Sirius. The Syrians apparently have imparted knowledge of mathematics and astronomy that helped in the construction of the monuments in ancient history, things like pyramids and temples. Then there was an alien species in contact with Earth known as the short greys from the Zeta Reticuli system. Short greys are 3 to 5 foot tall with large heads and oversized dark pool eyes. They're believed to be genetically engineered drones designed to serve a superior tall grey alien race. Tall greys conduct high-level diplomatic contact with humans, and they're represented in the world's shadow government. They may well be those behind the Illuminati. According to alien folklore, they arrived on Earth more than 600,000 years before our ancestors arrived 200,000 years ago. Reptilian, warlike, bloodthirsty. They have infiltrated human society. They have interbred, infecting humanity with their genes, and they use human beings against their own kind. Now, it sounds far-fetched, yet according to the research that we've done, there's incredible proof all over the place that different alien species exist. Dracos, Algarians, Algartians, Altacians, Amphibians, Anakim, Andromedas, Nimrods, Antares, Atlans, Algrulax, Ark, Albram, Barvies, Benarians, Blue People, the Blues, Butas, Sentients, Torsentients, Chameleons, Chirons, Diros. I could go on for a day. There are thousands. And each different alien species has a slightly different colour, has a slightly different way of speaking. And is that the reason that, unlike some planets where everybody speaks the same language, is it because Earth was a stopping off point that there are so many colours of humans and so many different languages? Even in the northeast of England, from Scotland down to Yorkshire, there's 50 or 60 different dialects. And is this really where they all came from? And think about it for a second. Imagine if, back at a time when we were coming out of the slime, and then we saw these amazing characters coming down from the stars, if they really did give us our colour and give us our speech and give us all the different accents, is it too far-fetched to think that one would come down and go, "Hey up, our kid"? Joking aside, if somebody from Sweden heard that, or somebody who was living in Australia heard that, it would be as alien to them as what we see on alien movies today. We mentioned the moon and how they've seen various buildings on the moon, and even during the space landing, the very first landing on the moon, there's said to be dialogue from the moon landing where one of the astronauts says he can see different craft moving up one of the sand dunes. I mean, going against gravity. And this is an alien craft on the moon during the moon landing.
60 seconds. I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, "They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us."
Now, you can talk as much as you like about maybe there's aliens in that UFO, maybe people have been abducted, maybe. Newspapers and magazines drive me crazy with maybes and ifs and buts. Cut to the quick. Who has seen an alien? Who has been abducted by an alien? And Denise Stoner is that person. Hello, Denise.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We want to know everything about this. When you the very first thing that happened to you with respect of the whole alien thing, what was it?
Well, believe it or not, I was only 2.5 years old. And my mom was actually in the hospital giving birth to my sister. I was alone in the house, or in the room, and my grandfather was taking care of me. And I was looking out the window at night, getting ready or waiting to be put to bed, and I thought somebody had put a nursery rhyme character up in the sky. I thought it was Humpty Dumpty. And I was watching and looking at this huge, huge, bright gold egg. And I was waiting for Humpty Dumpty to fall, if you remember the nursery rhyme.
Absolutely, of course.
Uh-huh. And my grandfather came through, and I said, Grandpa, who put Humpty Dumpty up in the sky? And he looked through the blinds, and I could see, and I remember even now the look of fear on his face. And it's just something that when something like that happens, you don't forget. It just sticks with you. So he said, let's go to bed. Let's just go to bed. We'll read our story. And here we go. So we went upstairs, and he gave me my bath, put me to bed, and my whole wallpaper was full of nursery rhyme characters.
Right.
So into bed we went. He went back downstairs, and I was watching, just lying in bed. I wasn't used to being completely, alone with just one person in the house, because both of my grandparents lived with us, Mom and Dad, and of course my dad was at the hospital with my mom. And here comes this little character, a robed or hooded character, through the wall, and came up to me, and he had long sleeves, and the hood was on, and he was carrying what looked like either a tool or a light of some kind, and approached the bed. And I wasn't afraid, I was more curious. And he put his hand out with this tool, and I thought, oh, well, he's another nursery rhyme character. I had just seen that object in the sky, and gestured for me to go with him. So I took his hand, and he had the great big eyes that what we call the Greys have now, and I went with him. And out into the hall we went, and right through the wallpaper.
You went through the wall?
Right through the wall, yeah.
And what did he do with you?
Well, I ended up in, I guess what I realize now was some sort of craft. A room where there were other children. Now, I don't recall what we did, except it was some sort of classroom where we were all having a lesson of some type. We were being taught something.
When you say we all, who else was there?
Other children of several ages. I was not even in school yet. I was just so tiny. And this went on for several years, even to the point where I saw my sister being floated over the top of her crib as a toddler.
Now, when you say this happened for several years, what, they kept coming back nightly, or how did it work?
Well, they kept coming back until now, even, for all different reasons, and then up to a point where my husband and I were taken in broad daylight out of the mountains in Colorado while we were driving.
While you were driving?
While we were driving.
Did you ever find out what happened to your car?
It was floated off the road.
Whoa.
We were floated off the road, and Kathleen Martin, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, I am working with her directly. She is my mentor, my hypnotist, the person that works with me on things that I can't recall fully.
Right.
But we were coming down off a mountain pass to go to our campground. We had driven the area for 2 years. And we were at the top of one pass that we were used to doing in daylight, and my parents and friends were waiting for us at our campground, and there was a big glacier valley below us called South Park Valley. And I was looking down, and I saw a couple of lights off it's like a desert at the bottom, and I couldn't figure out why they were there, because it was just big open space. And we came down off that pass down into the flat area, And as we did, we passed one small town. And as about 4 miles outside of that town, the lights started to travel toward us and came over the top of the car. And then I looked up, saw the lights above us, and they were so bright I couldn't see what they were attached to. The car lifted off the road, and I couldn't get my husband to respond. He was staring straight ahead. I could see him hanging onto the wheel. And the car lifted off the road and started to go out across the desert. And it went out all the way across for, several miles, I would say, and then settled down. And then I saw the lights come over the car and land in front of us, and there was a craft. And I was taken aboard the craft.
Your husband left in the car?
He has been hypnotized, and Kathy has instilled a type of amnesia in both of us so that we won't be discussing and remembering the same thing, and that way it makes the type of forensic memory that she's using, so that we won't make things up, let's put it that way.
No, I understand, because if you put you both in the same room and tell the same story, then the other one could latch onto that. No, I understand that. So you separate the two of you. When you were taken out of the car at that time, because how long ago was that? It can't be too long ago.
Well, this was in 1982.
Okay.
There's 3 hours of missing time.
Right.
When we came to, we were on the other side of the pass.
Wow.
3 hours later, and it's now dark. The headlights have been turned on the car, the motor is running, and my husband is driving.
Wow.
And back then, we didn't have cell phones.
Sure.
So by the time we reached our campground, and my husband had turned the odometer on in the car, and it hadn't moved.
Right.
So there was no determination as far as how far we had gone, didn't read correctly. So we got to the campground, and my parents were walking down the dirt road toward the ranch house where the caretaker of the ranch, to ask if they could use the only phone available to call the police.
Yes, to see if they could find you.
Yeah, and then my dad was going to get in the car and start driving the only route from Denver to where we were.
Now, you mentioned, though, that you've had these experiences that continue up to the present day. Presumably then, you will be able to answer a lot of the questions that people keep spouting about alien intervention. First of all, do they talk, or do they talk telepathically?
Telepathically, at least that's what I have to call it. I hear a voice, but I'd have to say it's either behind my head or in my head, and it's very brief, as if giving me instructions or briefly some information.
Like very to the point. And okay, describe to us, because you mentioned that they look like the greys. We've had people discussing the tall greys, the small greys, and a whole host of different types of aliens. How tall was the creature, and explain what it looked like to you, because you've seen them many times now, I gather.
I have 3 kinds that I call mine. The small grays are the typical gray skin-colored entities, about 3 foot tall, with a great big, large, dark eyes, and I think those are robots.
Right.
Because when I've entered the craft, I've seen them lining the walls, and I call them soldiers, because they don't move, I don't think, unless they're instructed to.
Right.
And they've just been lining the walls of the hallway, just staring straight ahead.
Right.
The taller one looks identical to that, except I have a feeling that they're not at all robots or robotic, because mine is more of an escort, and he can take away fear. I don't know how ageless they are. Some of them I think are very old, and recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, if you put mine in a lineup, like you would in a police lineup where you'd have several criminals, let's say, and mine's definitely not a criminal, I could choose mine. You might not be able to, but I could pick mine out.
Are you saying that they are very humanesque?
Kind of. They don't necessarily have emotions, but as soon as I enter a craft, they're able to take any fear away.
Right. And the third type, you mentioned there was 3 types in your case. What was the third?
The third one is what you would call an insectoid. They could, and I call mine the doctor because he has done any of the medical procedures that I've had done, and very, very intelligent, and he looks like the praying mantis.
He looks like the praying mantis, my goodness, which is not the prettiest thing you would like working on your body, I would imagine.
No, very, very tall, and the eyes are, let's say, pointed. The point is towards the sky, one towards the floor. Try to give you an idea.
Right. Yes.
And then the rounded portion is on the sides, left to right, and they blink left to right instead of up and down.
Right. And that alien was always the one carrying out medical procedures. You have the fear removed. What kind of things did that doctor do to you?
Well, it sounds bizarre, but I'm one of several that I think have been in a breeding program when I was younger. Several missing pregnancies. Point where I saw vials of fetuses. And at one point when I walked by one, they told me this. You'll see the quickening. His eyes looked right at me, and I felt a type of a bonding. I knew that was mine.
You knew that was your fetus, your child?
Yes.
So a breeding program, and were you ever given any knowledge as to what the human fetuses were to be used for?
I think they were a combination of human, of course, and what they were trying to, I think, improve themselves and attempt to improve us, possibly,
right.
To make us not so warlike and to make them bring back some of the emotions that they had lost.
Interesting. No, interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that they live amongst us, just they have managed to achieve what they had set out to do all those years ago? Do you think they are already out there amongst us? Because some people say they are, and we hear people talking about reptilians and what have you. Do you think they've achieved what they set out to do? Because you seem to be very impressed with the technological state of these people.
I think they are among us, but I don't believe they've achieved what they set out to do, no. There are some, I believe, and this is my opinion or feeling or sense of what's going on, but I think they've made some mistakes, because at one point I was told during whatever this process is that, and I can't figure this out, and neither can Kathy, there are some things wrong, I was told, and this is an interpretation.
Sure.
And when we cannot stop the process, in other words, I guess if you're pregnant with one of theirs and something is wrong, they can't take it back, you get to keep it and raise it.
Right.
Now, what does that mean?
No.
Are there some among us, and what goes wrong? And if so, what do they look like? How many are here that we've raised?
Begs an awful lot of questions. So here you talk about perhaps political and philosophical aspirations for these creatures.
Yes.
They seem to offer us no harm, because I get the impression that you don't feel threatened by these creatures, even though they've impregnated you on a number of occasions.
That's true, but I went through a spell where I spent about 3 days in my home saying to myself, well, you can't go outside, you're going to be taken. It's not going to stop. What has happened to your faith, if any? Where are you going to go with this? And finally I said, you know what? You don't have any choice in the matter. How is this going to change your faith? Because what if these people are just more advanced in their faith, and it's the same as yours? It just goes on, and you just have to accept it.
Now, let's just dive to the most recent episode that you've had with aliens. When was it? What was it?
Well, there are two I would consider, I guess, important. One, I was taken aboard a very large craft, and it is quite possible that I saw Kathy on the craft with me.
Right.
We're working on that to see if it was her. There was some sort of project going on, and they weren't happy with it. And this craft had a balcony that actually extended out from the craft. I was taken out of my bed here. My husband was removed into another room, and he knew it because he came through afterwards and said, I think they put me to sleep, or they put him in a state where he isn't aware while it's going on. And we were all lined up in the craft and given, it's a black box. It's sealed. It has no entryway that you can see. You can't open it. And we were to go on the balcony and drop the boxes when a signal is given over the side. Now, I know I was in an area like Switzerland, maybe Colorado, maybe because there were great giant granite cliffs, little tiny A-frame homes beneath. And, of course, the evergreen forest is what we were. It was very cold, very, very cold. And I was dressed in my night clothes, but there were people along the balconies that I could see next to me. I identified one of them, and he has never remembered because I saw him on the street, asked him if he owned clothes that I saw, and he said, yes, but you would never see me in those because I'm not in the same area. How do you know I have those? And I had to make something up.
Yeah, I was going to say that conversation's too long for the middle of the day, I guess.
Yes, that's true. But I had to prove to myself that I had seen him.
No, sure.
And there was a lady in a cocktail dress, dressed to the hilt, and she had to have been taken, perhaps leaving a party. But they were all lined up, and when we were told, we dropped the boxes, and I watched them just disappear, evaporate when we dropped them over the side.
And yet we can't seem to figure any kind of reason or function or end product there at all.
Well, I know what was in the boxes, if it's true. And it's a little bit mind-boggling. And then I found we've located several others that have been told the same thing, that these particular individuals are gatherers, keepers, and deliverers of human souls.
Human souls? Whoa.
Yeah.
Right.
That for something?
But that just puts the ball out the park, doesn't it? It takes us to a completely different place. So if we're talking about religion of whatever kind, irrespective of religion by the sound of things, because we're talking about people of all kinds, colours, creeds and faiths, irrespective of your religion, souls are handled by extraterrestrials. So it's up to them whether we move on or whether we hang around for a while.
There's so many questions. Think of the openings there and the questions. I don't know. Was it true? Were we told that? But we dropped something off the side of that craft in a box that felt very special, and they were not happy with the way this particular project was going. We could see nothing once it was dropped over. I'm in Florida, a tropical state.
You are.
When I woke up or came to in my bed, my husband came through and said, you were taken. I was freezing cold. My cheeks were frostbitten. My night clothes were soaking wet. And it was just, I had been somewhere outside of the tropical state. Yes,
So the second of those recent episodes that you said you considered to be particularly important, what was that?
That was, I say it's important because there's a little more absolute proof to the thing.
Right.
And that was a couple of years ago now, and I had gone with Kathy to Tampa, which is a couple of hour trip from here.
Well, of course.
And we meet in the middle. I leave my vehicle parked in a parking lot, and I get into her car, and we go off to Tampa, and we have this meeting that has to do naturally with UFOs.
Yeah.
And we have our meeting, we come back, and I at the time wore an insulin pump, which continuously pumps insulin because I'm diabetic.
Right.
And it takes a specific type of battery. So, and we had her elderly dad with us. He wanted to go, so we took him. And he was an engineer before he retired and worked with nuclear type things, so he was excited to hear. We come back, she drops me at my car, and she waited because I was going to call my husband and tell him I was on the way.
Right.
I take out my cell phone, and it's dead, and I had charged it fully.
Right.
I go to check my blood sugar to make sure it's all right for the trip, and did I need any extra insulin or food or whatever. The battery's dead on the pump.
Oh.
I go to get in the car and turn on the engine, make sure that's okay because it's a nighttime trip, the rest of my trip alone.
Right.
And I cannot adjust the mirrors on either side of my car, and then my radio is dead. So fuses have blown in my car.
Right.
So that's 4 things that aren't going to work for me. So she said, get back in my car for a minute, use my cell phone, call your husband, tell him. And it was a holiday, I don't remember which one, but nothing real, not Christmas, not something like that. So I called my husband and I said, I might be late, so don't worry about me.
Right.
I suppose I shouldn't have said that. And then her dad from the back seat said, were we taken? And we stopped to think about it, and there was a period of time when we actually felt her car, we were on a bridge, being lifted upward.
Right.
And her GPS took us off that road, which nothing ever goes wrong with it. It's built into her car system, and we got off the road so she could fix it.
Right.
So something wasn't right there. But, however, I got in my car, and I decided that at some point I would take a shortcut to my house.
Right.
Once I got off the highway. And at that point, when I turned off to that shortcut, I just lost all memory of where I was. Found myself at a back gate where we used to have a Navy base there because I worked on it.
Right.
And I came to at a point where there was a lake, and I was way down a curved driveway in front of an abandoned apartment.
Right.
And I saw a huge craft come out of the lake.
Come out of the lake, out of the water, right.
Out of the water. And I saw this entity step out from a tree, and I looked at my watch and I realized I was now an hour and a half late to get home. And so I was taken. We did some hypnosis work. And I then drove home. Of course, my husband was told not to worry, so he didn't react at all.
Right.
And I had all of those devices that weren't working.
And were they working then, or they were all still blown?
No, they were all blown.
And what did this alien want from you or do to you or on that particular occasion? Because as we said, these are relatively recent.
I was shown, and I have physical difficulties because of it. I was shown for probably the second time, like they wanted me to really take a look, the core of the craft and how it operated.
Right.
And I didn't remember it at all until we did some hypnosis work, but it left me, and Kathy has it on video, and she uses it on her lectures, and so do I. And it's a physical, uncontrolled body movement, because it looks like I'm being punched by the cause of this, whatever we know what it is. It's biological, it's organic, it's operated by something alive.
So the craft is not metal or whatever, it's some kind of organic biological material.
The inside of it, the part of it that operates the craft, yes.
Wow. Again, we're stepping into so many different avenues. Denise, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you for sharing so much.
Oh, and thank you for having me as a guest. It's been a pleasure.
Alan Robson from Rennes-le-Château.
Again in the dark shadows, and at the present moment I'm at a place that the Illuminati, what's that noise? Can you hear that in the background? Strange noise from behind the trees. And yet here I am in central France in a place called Rennes-le-Château. Now this has been classed by many people as alien central. More sightings of spaceships and spacecraft in this vicinity than any other on Earth. You can see that there is there's a river at the bottom of our hill, and yet there, high on the top of the cliffs, we have Magdalena Tower. Magdalena Tower. Where do you think they got that name from? On April the 24th of 1986, in the valley of Rennes-le-Château. Now, it's mentioned in the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail from 1982. And I'd been aware of this place for the longest time. And yet here is the place where so many people have seen things, and so many people have visited following books like that to try and find out the truth of this place and why these places are named what they're named. As we move down towards the bottom of the hill, you look up and you can kind of understand why someone would choose a place like this. A family that came here beyond the clouds, from beyond the clouds. Now, you could say, oh, well, yes, they came from heaven because Jesus, Christians and everything, or beyond the clouds in a craft. And it's strange because we've talked about so many things about alien intervention. We've talked about how the Illuminati want the world to come to a halt so that the people would be looking for a new hero, a new Messiah, to take their place, take the place of their standard politicians and give people a new future, a better future. You've got the castle here, the Tower of Magdalena Tower, used by Steven Spielberg as his inspiration for the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's so many things that have happened in this neck of the woods that we need to tell you about. Also, they found strange parchments here. And they have been, as recently as the 60s and in the 1980s, people came here to try and work out what these strange parchments said. And the parchments of Rennes-le-Château confirmed, first of all, that Mary Magdalene was here. Hence the name of the tower. There's a small village nearby called Magdala, because this was the place that Mary Magdalene, then the wife of Jesus, raised their families. So, strange documentation that's been found, the grand parchments. If you get a chance to look them up, do. Because I think the thing that you'll find is strange messages about Jesus, about Mary Magdalene, and about the things that they did. Now, this is proof, this is actual history that they did things here. Do I feel that this is a holy place? No. But it's a place that's got 1,000 stories to tell if we're going to look for them. I mean, at one time, this whole area was a dangerous place. People were not allowed in. I mean, if you were to arrive here in the Middle Ages, you wouldn't get into the town. You'd be stopped by knights. Why? Who was here? Whose family was so important that you'd get killed for trying to enter the town? Rennes le Chateau. Also, the whole story of the Bible has been pretty much reinterpreted. The village church here is dedicated to Saint Mary Magdalene, and it's got a really complex history. It's been rebuilt time after time after time, and it goes back to the 800s. The original church was in ruins by the 10th or 11th century, and yet it keeps being rebuilt, but not so much by the church. This must be the only church that actually has a figure of Lucifer, a character called Lucifer. They're Luciferians, the Illuminati, based their whole life on this image, and not an image of a god, or a demigod, or a fallen god, like the Christians say Satan is, but of a person from another world. Look at Satan. What colour's his skin? Does he look like us? So, here we are, Rennes-le-Château, Alien Central. We know that Jesus' family lived here. We actually have the history. We have the written documents. We have the parchments. We would also love to read the Dead Sea Scroll that the Catholic Church will not let us read. Now, just finally, I want to throw something out at you. How many times have you bitched about our government? How many times have you bitched about what the Americans were doing and how Britain always follows them into yet another war that we don't want, where our people are being sent back in body bags? How many times have you said, well, what are we doing in that place? We've bombed them back to the Stone Age. What are we doing there? How many times have you complained that the money in your pocket isn't as much as it used to be 20 years ago? How many times have you complained about the banks getting even more bonuses? Rich people telling us how to live our lives, and we're just stuck like pawns, like slaves. We're not getting value for our money. We're not even allowed to have our own homes anymore. They're being repossessed, or they're sticking a bedroom tax on them. How long is it going to be before you look for another way? And then the question comes, if somebody does step forward, a charismatic Richard Branson-style character, or somebody brand new, somebody whose name you've heard, Rothschild or something like that. Imagine somebody steps forward and says, I want to unite all the countries on earth. I will guarantee that your life will be better. A new world order, one currency, one military, so you could never have anybody to fight with, one government. What it says goes. Discipline. No disorder on the streets. No riots. No strikes. The stones of Georgia. I don't know whether you've ever come across them. They're written in ancient languages. Some say they're Babylonian. Some say that they are classical Greek. Others say they're not of this earth. Nobody can translate them. Nobody knows what they say. But they speak of a new world order, how it's going to be on Earth, and how the planet will thrive, because breaking the law, you will not want to do that. Your life could be the result. You have to give up your life if you break the law. Strong discipline, a land where everybody is thriving, everybody owns their own homes, they can provide for their families in ways that we're not able to now. Would you vote for that? If a brand new party came about, the Illuminati party, would you vote for them? If they guaranteed to you no more crime, no more war, just better times for everybody, Whose side should you be on then? The Illuminati, who've tried to protect the family of Christ so that they could prove that there is another way and that they've been lying to you all along. My question is, who do you support? Are you on the side of the church? Or are you on the side of the Illuminati? And in future, it may well be that you have to make that decision, and perhaps your life will depend on it. I'm here at Rennes-le-Château, Alien Central. It looks beautiful, idyllic, central France, miles away from anywhere.
Roswell, the story they tried to cover up.
I got a phone call. Well, I got a number of phone calls, but the one that really got my attention was purportedly from the Pentagon. There was a young lady on the line saying, Colonel so-and-so, this is the Pentagon calling. And this was within a few minutes of it going out on the wire. And the voice on the line says, who is this? I tell him. He said, you put that story on the air about the flying saucers? And I mean, his voice was, the type that really conveys menace and power. And I said, yes, I did. And he says, you're going to get in a lot of trouble for this, or made some threatening comment. And I said, look, I'm a civilian. You can't talk to me this way. You can't treat me this way. You can't tell me what to do in stories I put on the air. And he says, I'll show you what I can do. And bang, hung up the phone.
I got a call from Washington, from one of the offices of one of the senators, saying, look, if you put out any stories on this thing, you're going to lose your license. And it's not going to be over a period of time. It's going to be the same day that we tell you that you're off the air.
For 30 years, the Roswell crash remained a dark secret. This story wasn't talked about until 1978.
I was amazed as to what I saw. The amount of debris that was scattered over such an area. It took me a while to realize that there's something strange about it. That the more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with. I proved by trying to burn it, it wouldn't burn. I tried to break it, it would not break. If it was something of ours, I'm sure there would be no reason to keep it under cover that long. If it's an aerial spacecraft, there's another reason why it would not never been owned by anybody here until they found out more about it. I sensed that there was a cover-up someplace about this whole matter.
Now we're going to cut over to Union City in California, where we find Ruben Uriarte, who is a UFO researcher. He's been involved in television programs up the kazoo. He knows everything about everything. We need to talk to this man. Hello, Ruben.
Greetings.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about contact between human beings and aliens. Now, you've done some shows about ancient aliens. How confident are you that we as a species have not directly just witnessed these things, but actively interacted with them?
Well, that's a real good question, and I think a lot of it has to do with the archives or any of the historical records one could find in terms of either through archaeology or anthropology or through documents, and it could go way back. And then evaluating some of these reports that were often documented by witnesses who claimed to have seen these objects and then later have depicted or have indicated that they have had actual contact. So over the years, there's been a number of researchers that have been focusing on various aspects of this contact phenomenon. And so right now, currently, the way we are understanding the phenomena of contact is either through folks, or those folks that or people who've had the abduction, or at the same time there are those with that called close encounters of the fifth kind, which is a basically where people will either try to communicate with them, and or they will establish communication with people.
Right.
That could be through a lot of. So there's different varieties of that. So as far as and then the other aspect of it is the encounters that our military personnel may have had in terms of over the years. One of the things that both my co-author and I'm also written several books on crash retrievals, and these crash retrievals we've been focusing on the U.S.-Mexican border.
Right.
And there's been several cases where some personnel have actually found the bodies. Of course, we're going back to the Roswell, 1947, and then, of course, we have a number of other documented crashes. So
sure.
it is a really fascinating subject, obviously.
No, for sure. And when you look back, though, when you actually go around museums, like in Mexico, those dishes that they've found with actual aliens painted onto gold dishes that are in spacesuits, and that's from 500 years BC, some of these things. The more you see, the more obvious that it was. Why do you think that people haven't taken it seriously up until now?
Well, I believe a lot has to do with our technology. Now that we have the internet, now that we have cable TV and a number of other networks, a lot radio shows, as well as YouTube, and that I think just that the fact that the technology has had a major influence in informing our society. The thing about the fact, when we go to like Eric von Daniken, for example, and several of the other researchers, the way we were able to understand the theories, of course, was through his writings, and through that, it obviously influenced a number of other people to look at other evidence. So over the years, there just seems to have been a proliferation of people who are into studying this and are also making some amazing discoveries.
It just needed people to ask questions. I just don't know why people hadn't asked questions right from the very beginning, because the implications here would have changed every religion on planet Earth.
I believe it definitely. And the part of the issue, of course, is that how does mainstream science accept this? For example, I am in contact with several people that I know that have possessions of these stones. They have these remarkable depictions of people or aliens are in contact with people through these stone artifacts. I mean, all the history is written on these stones.
Right.
And they're engraved, and it's amazing. And so there's a number of these rocks that are being discovered. The problem is that a lot of the mainstream archaeologists and other scientists don't want to touch it because the fact that it's, they're concerned about their reputations, their jobs, and that.
Sure.
I think that's slowly changing. And
thank heavens for that. Out of all of the, let's put you on the spot then, Ruben, if I can. Out of all of the people that you've met, because I know how thorough your investigations are, because, you've done shows like UFO Files, UFO Hunters, Ancient Aliens. You've done all of these things. Out of all of the people that you've met, because realistically, we only need one story of alien contact to be true, and aliens are real instantly. Has there been one story that you just knew this guy or this woman was telling you what she'd experienced and it was real?
Well, in terms of, let's say, an encounter with an object, whether the object was intelligently being flown by something inside or an occupant. Right. I think I've come across many interesting stories over the years. I think the one that really stands out in my mind, of course, I am more focused on the on aviation encounters.
Sure. Right.
For a number of reasons. But the one that really has always fascinated me has been the case of Mr. Carlos de los Santos, who was a pilot who was driving a small private plane back in May of 1975. And his plane was surrounded by three UFOs. And this gentleman, the pilot, was calling out Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And the entire recording, as well as the objects, were being tracked by the radar systems at the Mexico City airport. So we have evidence of that, as well as his actual Mayday call. He said he had no control of his plane for approximately 18 minutes. These objects were raising his plane to a higher altitude, with him having no control. And his biggest fear was his cockpit or his cabin was not pressurized.
Right.
So he thought he was going to die for lack of oxygen. But fortunately, they released the plane. And the reason why I bring that case up is because 8 months earlier, in August of 1974, there was a report of a small plane that would collide with a UFO, and this is happened over the area of Mexico, over the northern part. So, when you start looking for obviously a connection there, and in some other cases where we've been finding other crash retrievals, there's evidence that's basically pointed out in the document by witnesses saying that they have seen dead aliens inside the craft.
Right.
But as far as any actual pictures of crash.
So, Ruben, you've studied these things from a time when people must have thought you were mad. I would imagine now they're not thinking you're quite so mad.
Well, the thing that I find quite unique is number one, we're dealing with a population that needs to be informed.
Right.
And I think over the years, through a lot of outreach by MUFON, for example, I'm a member, I'm a state director for Northern California MUFON.
Right.
I try to do as many presentations in front of non-UFO groups.
Right.
So I think that's really the target that we need to reach. Secondly, there's a lot of information out there that also is distorted, so sometimes, obviously, that needs to be corrected.
Sure.
And I think where I may have left off was the fact that in our research on crashes on the Mexican border, and why so many, I don't know. And that's what's really troubling is over the years there's been I found a document that focused on crash retrievals from 1947 up to 1987 for 40 years. But in that, there were more than probably 40% of those crashes were in the Southwest. So, which it's like a puzzle. We try to look at all the different puzzles or all the different pieces to the puzzle, and sometimes you get some extraordinary testimony by witnesses. So it's amazing, and I think over the years, I think that what amazes me the most is that it's the same description,
right?
Same experiences for people from all over the parts of the world. I found that true when I was in the UK, or I was in Mexico or Puerto Rico. Just that the people's experiences, and these are people who do not know each other, obviously.
Right.
They're saying almost the same identical thing. So.
No, for sure. Ruben, it's been a joy. Thank you so much for spending some time with us all.
Oh, a pleasure, and a big my greetings to the entire audience there.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information.
The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs, which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizzell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Ricefield, Ohio.
Roswell, the story they tried to cover up.
General DuBose said that specifically to us, that the balloon explanation that the Air Force offered was a cover story. Do you get the reporters off General Ramey's back? So we have a wide body of testimony that was a cover-up. We have military witnesses saying they were sworn to secrecy.
Everyone who witnessed this historic event was ordered to keep quiet. Why?
And he said, I want you to know you were never there. I didn't understand what he meant. So I said, yes, I was. And he said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. And he said, can't you get this through your head? You never saw anything. You were not there. You don't know anything. And he said, this is a big desert out here. We can just take you out in the middle of this desert and no one will ever find your bodies. He said, you'll be nothing but bones and nobody will ever know what happened to you. And I told him I would not talk about it.
What could they have been hiding from us for the past 70 years?
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What we really need right now is a conversation with a former NASA astronaut and maybe somebody who's been ambassador for the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Been there, watched the rockets take off. Amazing experience, unlike any other. And I've got Brian Duffy on the end of the line. Hello, Brian.
Alan, glad to be with you.
Great to talk to you. First of all, what's it like getting up there in space? You've been up there 4 times.
Well, it's a nice place, right? So I went back. I couldn't get enough of it, so I kept going back. So, yeah, no, it's a marvelous experience. It's a great place, and they're so happy to be accomplished and do it, and then happy to come home as well. So, Earth's not such a bad place.
No, absolutely. It's always good to get your feet back on the ground. I would imagine, though, everything up there at the very beginning would be fascinating, and we know you've trained for it and you've been weightless and all that, but I would imagine once you're weightless completely for the next 10, however many days, that's a different thing altogether. Nothing would really prepare you for that.
True, but what's amazing is when you go the first time, the weightlessness is a bit of a novelty for a day or two.
Right.
But then after that, it's as if you've been weightless your entire life. You've floated your whole life. So it becomes completely normal as sitting in a chair here on the ground.
Did you ever think after the first time that you were up there that you should take like a jar of pickled onions and just fire them up in the air and spend the afternoon chasing them?
We do that a lot with M&M. Some things that aren't as messy.
Yeah, not quite so dumb. I'll get you. When you are up there, what is the worst part about it?
actually being away from your family.
Right.
Yeah, you feel very detached from the world. It's a personal feeling. Everyone feels differently, but for me, that's what it was. Saying goodbye to your family was hard, and being there away from them. But you're there doing a job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Obviously, I went back 3 more times.
Sure. I mean, you were responsible for carrying out a lot of remedial work on the space station, and you were using these amazing robotic arms and really for us, very high-tech technology.
It was very high-tech, and, you think about the shuttle. It was designed back in the 60s, actually,
right,
or maybe the mid 70s. So we were still using slide rules back then,
right,
to design it. And technology's come a long way over the years. But the vehicle was so capable. It was just the most amazing flying machine ever built by humans.
I also have to ask you, because when anybody drives up to the Kennedy Space Center, the first thing you realize, and it's the first thing that you realize, and yet it's obvious when you think about it. You're going to a space center. You got rockets everywhere there. There's rockets everywhere.
Yeah, the good news is the places you can go, they're not going to explode.
But I mean, literally, you're walking through a field of.
Yeah, we actually call it the Rocket Garden.
The Rocket Garden.
We do, yeah, and and if you walk through the Rocket Garden and keep going through the complex, you'll come to a nice, large new building with the space shuttle Atlantis in it, which is an incredible display there. You can get right up close to it. It's the orbiter that I flew on my first mission, so I have a very special attachment to it. And whenever I'm at the Kennedy Space Center, I always go over there and I look and make sure they're keeping my windows clean.
That's lovely. I mean, also, there's a number of simulators that people can go on to essentially follow in your footsteps.
There is. There's I guess you'd call it an exhilarating simulation of a space shuttle launch. That's what it's called, the shuttle launch experience.
Yeah.
And it gives you an idea of what it was like on board and what some of the sites are. So that's fabulous. We're coming up with a new one now. For people that come to the visitors complex, there's something called the astronaut training experience.
Wow.
And that involves Mars. And so
fantastic.
You find yourself using virtual reality. We can bring you to Mars. And
fabulous.
So that'll be a great attraction as well.
No, for sure. I mean, everybody must ask you about UFOs and spacecraft and all the rest of it. You've been up there 4 times. Did you see anything?
I never saw anything that I couldn't explain.
Right.
But I saw some really neat things. In fact, one time we were coming right down the spine of Mexico, so we were going northwest to southeast, and I looked across the Gulf of Mexico over to Florida to the Kennedy Space Center, actually, and I watched a rocket launch.
Oh, there. My goodness.
And so it came up to our altitude, and I was glad it was going the other direction.
I may well have been there on the ground, because I was lucky enough to be there when one of the guys took off, and it's otherworldly. It's everybody thinks, well, it's just a rocket taking off. The Earth shakes. It's the vibration in the air, I think, that hits you more than anything else. An incredible experience.
It is, and you're realizing that how much energy it takes to get something into space. We start out going 0 miles an hour on our launch pad. And 8.5 minutes later, we're going 17,500 miles an hour. It's 8 kilometers per second, and that takes a lot of energy. And what you did is experience it. So in 2017, folks that do come to the visitor center can, good chance that they'll see a rocket launch while they're there, because there are more than 30 of them happening this year.
My goodness, amazing. And well worth traveling the distance just for that. Got to ask you, though, I'm going to chase these aliens with you, I have to say. You worked with NASA, obviously. NASA keep closing the feed when something happens. Everybody, the world's watching the whole NASA feed, and then all of a sudden somebody will say, hang on, there's a... Then the feed goes down. What's that all about? You're keeping secrets, you guys.
I heard somebody say that just the other day, and I thought, well, maybe if there's something to hide, I guess I'd have to do that. But I'm certainly not aware of anything they'd need to do that on.
You must have talked to people that have seen the bodies of the aliens in Area 51. Come on. You're an astronaut, Brian. You're behind the veil of secrecy.
You know, I'm more of an engineer, so not so much a sci-fi guy.
No, but this is the thing. You probably worked on these spacecraft reverse engineering so that next time you go up, you'll be safer.
Okay, you got me. I finally admit it.
But, I mean, there must be talk amongst you guys about this kind of thing, because other astronauts have come out and said, I saw this, I experienced that. Even some of the guys that went on the moon were making claims about stuff that they'd seen up there. Is there not chat between you fellas?
You know, not. I guess not about that stuff. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anybody. And, you know, and I've known everybody from, you know, the John Glenn era, you know, all the way to, you know, most of today's astronauts. So
right.
Never had that conversation about anything that unusual.
I find that amazing because NASA people put an announcement out saying they've found 7 more planets where they're fairly sure that there will be life of some kind there. So maybe your next trip, Brian's going to be to find out.
Maybe they'll name one after me.
Yes, we're on our way to Duffy. I wouldn't hold your breath, Bri, frankly.
Yeah, I won't, but I'm happy that they're doing things like finding those exoplanets. Maybe we'll get a better look at them pretty soon when the James Webb Telescope launches, because it's going to be much more powerful even than the Hubble Space Telescope.
And maybe it'll give us some of the answers that we're looking for. Absolutely fantastic. What has been your biggest kick out of all of your trips up there?
The biggest kick, you know, I'm always happy when we're successful with the mission. But actually on my last flight there, rendezvous and docking with something that was already in space. That was pretty amazing. That's something that fulfilled a dream of my childhood.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, Brian, I have to say, having heard your answers about UFOs, we know you've been abducted and probed, and you've obviously been given a script that you have to follow. We understand. And we hope the probing didn't do you too much harm, but we're very, very grateful to talk to you. People who watched Star Trek like 30, 40, 50 years ago were already using the mobile phones and that kind of thing, laptops, and this is an amazing addition to it, because we're watching sci-fi to see what the next step's going to be for you fellas.
Well, I guess that puts things out there for people to try to go develop. So they try to develop the technology. Maybe there'll be a teletransporter here one of these days.
Oh, well, in which case I'd be sitting on your knee now, Brian.
Yeah, and they'll beam us both up.
Hey, fantastic! No, it's been an honor, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Alan, my pleasure. Thank you.
You know what I think, Doctor? I think I should allow you to introduce Colonel Corso. Many people will not know who Colonel Corso is. They might know he's got a book called The Day After Roswell, and that might be about all they know. What would you say of Colonel Corso beyond that?
Well, I first met Colonel Corso about a year ago, and he came to us with a very unusual story, and that had to do, of course, with alien technology and the things that he has written about in his book. One of the things that struck us, of course, was his credentials, and of course, sometimes people fake them.
That is just the beginning, so there are many, many questions. All right, let's see if we can bring him on. Colonel, are you there?
I'm here.
And what I'd like you to do, if you'd be willing, is to tell us about your own background.
My background, well, I came in the Army in 1940, when the war started, right after Pearl Harbor. And I was drafted, and I went to officer school, and I came out as second lieutenant, and they put me in an artillery outfit. Right after that, I got transferred to intelligence, and I was sent to England, got promoted to first lieutenant, and I joined British MI-19, and they sent me to Cambridge for 3 weeks, and I learned intelligence under them. And from there, I went to North Africa. I became an interrogator, prisoners of war, and worked with the British and with their commandos. Then I went to North Africa. And from North Africa, I participated in the landing at Salerno Harbor in Italy. Then I came up through Italy all the way to Cassino, and I was in the battles of Cassino. And from there I landed on the beach at Anzio, and then went into Rome. And there they made me Assistant Chief of Staff G2 Intelligence and Intelligence and Security Chief of Rome Area Command. And I participated there in reestablishing law and order. I destroyed the Gestapo and SS nets. And from there I came back to Fort Riley, Kansas.
So your career, to the point that you met the general, was a very honorable...
It was in combat at the time. We were fighting a war in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. And then I joined the general. I went to Korea after that. I participated in the Korean War, and I joined MacArthur's staff over there. Then I came back, and when I came back to the States, I joined President Eisenhower as one of his military aides in the National Security Council at the White House. And there my career sort of changed. I was in the White House for 4 years. And from there I took command of a missile battalion, the Army's missile firing range at White Sands.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took a combat missile battalion, and I had atomic warheads even, to Germany. And I stayed in command 18 months, and then I became Inspector General of 7th Army. And from there I came back to the United States, and General Trudeau had reorganized research and development of the Army. And he sent for me, and I joined him as a special assistant and chief of the Foreign Technology Division.
So you had a very, very long military career before you met General Trudeau.
Yes. Well, I met him when he was chief of Army Intelligence. Well, what happened is I brought General Trudeau what we called the National Intelligence Estimates. These were the basis for U.S. policy, and they were made by CIA.
All right, so now you went to work for General Trudeau, and this is where things begin to get interesting for you.
Yes.
At this point, again, you had never laid hands on anything extraterrestrial, probably hadn't seen a UFO or anything else. In other words, you were not any sort of ufologist or even interested.
I saw a body at Fort Riley, Kansas, but I put that out of my mind until I could corroborate the information. I can intelligence and prove it. And later there were some experiences that happened. My radars were picking up objects at White Sands when I commanded the range battalion, traveled 3,000 or 4,000 miles an hour.
I guess that we better back up then. If you saw a body at Fort Riley, Texas, tell my audience...
Kansas. It was in Kansas.
Kansas. Tell my audience that story.
Well, what it was, I was appointed one night post-duty officer. Actually, lately there have been some criticisms. They said that the security was lax at Fort Riley if I did that. But I was the security officer that night, or the post-duty officer. And people know the Army know that when you're appointed post-duty officer, you're responsible for all the guards and security all that night on the post.
Why would anybody criticize that? I was in the Air Force, Colonel, and I remember that most all bases had an on-duty officer for the night.
The critics didn't know this. They weren't in the Army. And really that night, I was the security. And when I went down, one of my sergeants, Master Sergeant I knew well, was Sergeant of the Guard because we had horses in the area, the veterinarian area. And these I think it was 5 of them, yes. There was 5 boxes there that looked like caskets. And I went on in the room, because I was a security officer, I had to go inspect it. They told me there was sensitive cargo there. It come by truck.
Was it in transit, or was that...
It was in transit.
It was in transit, all right.
I'll tell you how I knew that. Now, I went in and I picked up the tarp, and I saw this body. Of course, I turned a little bit. At first I thought it was a young, baby or something. Then I got a little bit turned, like you do in combat, when something like that happens, your stomach gets upset, but you recover fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the Sergeant, get out of here because sensitive area, I don't want you in trouble. Go out to your post, and I'll be out in a second. I put the tarp back down, Now, this only lasted 10 or 15 seconds.
And what do you recall seeing? You say you saw a body, Colonel.
I saw an extraterrestrial, skinny arms, skinny legs, under 5 feet, had a fairly large head. Not large, but compared to the body, it was large. And the eyes, they were slanted eyes. No nose, no mouth, no ears. and it was floating in some liquid, and it was a gray color. And that's what I saw. Then I immediately dismissed it. I figured, I don't know what it is until I can corroborate like an intelligence, maybe later. And later on, I was able to prove what it was.
Do you know what that liquid was?
No, I had no idea.
Uh-huh. And you say there were a total of 5. Is that correct? 5 caskets or 5, if that's what you want to call
them? No, they were crates-like, but they had a liquid in them. The thing was floating in some sort of liquid.
Okay, what date was this, as best you can recall?
It was 1947. It was in July.
July.
Because I went to Fort Riley, Kansas. I was stationed out there with garrison duty. We had an intelligence aggressor force we were setting up for the military, and we were writing courses for intelligence. And I joined the Department of Non-Resident Instruction at Fort Riley, Kansas.
All right. Since you're an eyewitness to this, and you're now 82 years old, is that correct?
82.
It's very, very important that we be very clear about what you saw there. This is a very key point, I believe. The Air Force, as you well know, had a news conference and said, well, they were dummies. Now, is there any chance that what you saw, and in fact, as you know, the Air Force at their news conference showed these dummies that they dropped in later years, 1953 actually, but even if they had dropped them in 1947, they might have. Could you have been looking at a dummy, a non-being?
You know, I told people in late interviews that I will not criticize the sister service, and I won't, because I fought in Korea with them, and I have a lot of friends in the Air Force, but their superiors I will criticize. There was no question in my mind what it was. I know the difference between a body like that I saw there and a dummy, or even a monkey, like some said, and then they've even come forth and said maybe it was Japanese in that balloon. I don't know where they get these stories or why they make them up. It's beyond comprehension to me. They don't have to do this.
So you saw a creature, there's no question about it.
Yes.
I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, which was the site of presumed alien crash in 1947, and which, from what I call the testimony of the old-timers who were there and who had been hushed up by government authority, military authority, almost on pain of death at the time, and who had harbored their knowledge quietly for years, as when I came back from the moon, and I was a local boy, they considered me safe enough to tell their story to, that they were a part of the recovery effort and the observer of the so-called Roswell crash, and that they knew for sure that it was an alien craft. And subsequent sightings, subsequent evidence has reaffirmed all of that we are being visited and have been visited by alien spacecraft and alien beings. And our governments around the world have covered it up, but only recently other governments have started to open their files, except the United States has still not started opening its files. But most of the major countries in Europe, South America, that have these files, and in Mexico, Belgium, France, Brazil, and Argentina, and Mexico have opened their files.
Somebody that knows stuff is always a joy to talk to, and we have paranormal radio show host Heather Wade, who has seen a top secret report. Let's find out all about it. Hello, Heather.
Well, good evening. It sure is a pleasure to be here, and I have that top secret, ultra top secret document right here in my hot little hand.
How did you get your hands on it in the first place?
Well, I have many, many listeners out there, and one of my listeners and a friend of his who is former military had been sitting on this document for a number of years, and they both recently got together and were catching up on things, as friends do.
Sure.
And the other friend said, you know, we still have those papers. Do you know anyone who might be interested in that? And my friend said, actually, you know what? I sure do. And he thought he would hand it off to me. And what we did was try to figure out if this was previously released. So that was the first thing we did before anybody knew anything about it at all.
Right.
Before anybody knew that I even had it, we started going to CIA.gov and theblackvault.com and many websites like this, trying to figure out, has this already been released? And we couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
So then I call up Stanton Friedman, and I said, hey, Stanton, will you look at something for me? And he said, well, sure, I'll take a look at it. And then I call up Art Bell, and I said, hey, Art, how many top-secret government documents have you ever looked at? And he just stopped and paused, and he goes, why? I said, I want you to look at something. And so here I've now got Art Bell and Stanton Friedman looking at it. And then in about 8 minutes, Art calls me back, and he goes, where did you get this? And I told him. And he said, you have to release it. You have to release it right now.
Yeah,
this is brand new.
Yeah.
And Stanton's preliminary judgment, as he was examining it with a big old magnifying glass, because some of the text in there really is hard to read, he thinks on first inspection that it's authentic. Now, a lot of UFO people in the last few days have come out to say that they think that it's fake, but I haven't seen anybody come up with a substantial argument or any evidence to show me that it's fake. Anybody can point at something and say that it's fake. But, you know, the more I look at it, and of course I'm getting a lot of emails from my listeners telling me, well, I've looked at top secret documents and it looks like it's within the format to me. So I think people are protecting their reputations by saying that it's fake, and I can understand that, but I think this very well may be the evidence that a lot of us have been looking for decades.
Now, I mean, you're hitting the right kind of people with Stanton and Art there, again, along with yourself. Big names in the business dealing with all things UFO in the States. And yet, how come a whole bunch of people in black suits didn't come and say, well, let us have a look at that, we'll be the judge of it, give it to us? Because that kind of thing has happened in the past.
Well, I can tell you that my phone has had some, let's just say, unexplained anomalies lately. But no, I'm waiting for the men in suits to knock on my door, but they have not yet. So I don't know what that is about.
So for those that haven't heard about this stuff yet, what's actually in there then? I mean, tell us what it confirms.
All right, so it confirms Roswell. It also confirms a controlled landing in 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico. And I think the reason that this looks a little bit odd to most of us is because, well, most of us haven't seen documents that are addressed to the office of the president, which this one is.
Right.
So how many of us get to see papers that the President of the United States get to see? Not very many of us. So the first thing it outlines is what Majestic 12 is. That is the first thing that it talks about, and then after that it talks about what MJ-12 is and does. It talks about advanced beings of non-human nature are continuously being detected along with their flying disc craft in the controlled space of the United States since the 7th of July, 1947. And get this, I hate to read on the air, but I hope you're sitting down. The remains of 7 flying craft and the bodies of 27 deceased non-human beings have been discovered as of this briefing date, which is January 8th, 1989, and are at present being studied by Magic 12 scientists. 3 of the recovered craft are nearly intact, and one such machine has maintained some of its power since retrieval in 1948. So that is some of the information about Majestic 12 and why they formed Majestic 12 in the first place. And it's their duty to evaluate the risk, control, and containment of the violation of United States airspace and national security by unknown and possibly hostile aliens of one or more advanced races of beings presumed to have originated elsewhere than on planet Earth. That's directly from the document. Then it goes into who Majestic 12 is and a little more on that. The first case we get to, which is listed as a historical precedent in the document, says Roswell, New Mexico, July 7th, 1947. And it talks about there being a wreckage found It was broken up into about 347 different pieces, but they found 4 dead and badly decomposed extraterrestrial bodies that were then removed and studied.
Wow.
And it's right there in black and white, Alan.
That whole thing, though, about numbers of craft, because, yes, we've all watched Independence Day and thoroughly enjoyed it, and we've watched alien movies since the 50s in drive-in cinemas or as a B-movie to a main feature. And yet, deep down, there's always been this kind of, well, it can't really be true. Well, yes, there must be life out there, but it's never going to touch ours. The shows that I've done over the last number of years have been travelling around the world looking at proof of alien intervention in places like Peru or Egypt or the underground cities of Turkey. We've been all over the place doing that. And yet to get so close to finally somebody of substance coming out with something that is, and it is proof what you have there. I have no doubt that it's proof. We've been waiting for it to come out, and yet when you hear it, you go, well, what does this mean in the historical sense? How is it going to change our world from this point on? What do you think?
Well, there's a number of things there. First, we have to consider the fact that here we have, in black and white, right here in our hands, and by the way, I'm not charging for anybody to look at it. Anybody can go to our website and download it for free of charge and look at exactly what I'm looking at. And the first thing we have to come to terms with is this is a government document that acknowledges the existence and the visitation of extraterrestrial life to Earth. What are we always told? There's no such thing as UFOs. Mm-hmm. Even if there were, they're not coming here. Right. Well, this is the exact opposite of that. So that's the first thing we have to come to terms with. Second thing is, well, there is extraterrestrial life, and it's visiting Earth. Yeah. How do we as human beings come to terms with that? Well, I think the easiest way to come to terms with that is to realize that in this document, and I find this to be about the juiciest bit of information in here, it does discuss the 4 different types of extraterrestrial that they are familiar with so far. And in that list of different kinds of extraterrestrials, only one type is listed as possibly hostile, which I find very interesting because, okay, here we go. I might as well just lay this out on you, and then you can respond to it. Right. Non-humanoid EBEs. First off, we've got humanoid EBEs. We've got small humanoids or grays. Then we get to non-humanoid EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities. These are in several classes and come from worlds where dominant morphology took a different evolutionary course. Many of these are dangerous, not for organized hostile intentions, but because these creatures do not hold human life as sacred. To them, we're animals despite our intelligence. A few are friendly because of their cultures forbid all acts against living creatures. Thus far, contact has been minimal, with only a handful of unfortunate encounters. Now, if we were dealing with misinformation, wouldn't it be all about, well, the aliens just want to kill you and eat your babies? That's not what we find here.
Yeah, but it does infer that there's been some harm done. Some people have, apart from unfortunate. That's the kind of things you say when somebody at a zoo's been eaten by a tiger. Well, it was unfortunate. It does sound like some harm has been done to somebody somewhere down the road.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. So we don't have a perfectly sanitized picture of friendly extraterrestrials. We also don't have a demonized picture of extraterrestrials that want to peel your skin off in the middle of the night. Right. We don't have that. We've got a very balanced look at different kinds of extraterrestrials that are out there. We also have listed in the document transmorphic entities that I understand don't exactly have a body, or in the words of the document here, transmorphic entities exist in some other dimension or plane, which is to say not in our space or time. So we've got to come to terms with, you were asking, how does this change the world? How does this change history? Well, we've got to come to terms with there are not only life forms visiting Earth, but 4 different types of life forms visiting Earth. And how does that affect history? Well, you get deeper into the document, and there's an alleged transcription of an interview with a humanoid EBE, and that humanoid EBE talks about visiting Earth 7,000 years ago. There's even a quote about going to the Isle of Pines in the Pacific Ocean 115 centuries ago.
Wow.
So that has big implications for religion.
We absolutely, and on top of that, it renders every religious... The fact that there's alien life out there at all renders all of the books, the holy books, to being untrue, because they all say life was only on this planet. So it has massive implications. And also the thing that you said about entity that is not of this dimension could, if we're pushing this to the max, that could explain ghosts. Something from another dimension that we catch a glance of every now and then, but can't explain. So I don't know whether I'm just dancing further down the lane than we've reached, but this is a fascinating place to be.
Oh, no, you're right on. Actually, you're spot on, because let me continue here. TEs exist in some other... Okay, so I told you that. They do not use devices to travel in space. Only once has a member of an MJ-12 contact team been privileged to be present when introduced by an Earth-like EBE to a transmorphic entity. Now, this is the part you're going to be very interested in, Alan. In essence, these entities are composed of pure mind energy. They are not unlike ghostly spirits and seem to be only curious about our universe. They are said by other EBEs to be capable of taking on any physical form that they put their energy into as matter. This may very well explain the ghostly phenomena, the shadow person phenomenon, the half man, half other kind of creature that we see all throughout history.
Sure.
This very well may explain gods. I'm not sure.
Well, shapeshifters, my goodness. I've spent a batch of my life travelling, hunting ghosts and phenomenon of 1,000 types with varying degrees of success. And yet, you get, and I must admit, just to let everybody know, you host a radio show called Midnight in the Desert, and an amazing thing it must be. I'm very jealous of the documents you got. I've had various things handed to me about British-related stuff over the years, but this is clearly probably the most important document that there's been in the last 100 years, surely.
Well, when it comes to ufology and the truth that you and I and so many other good people have been chasing, not for years, but for decades, people have been chasing the truth about the unexplained, about visitation to Earth, about so many things. And you know what, I would have handed it to you. I'd be more than happy to hand this over to you and give you the credit, because it's been a whirlwind. Ever since this was released, it's sort of taken on a life of its own, and I don't know if I'm happy or if I regret it a great deal.
Because it is, you see, what this does in a way is it steals pretty much everything you've been taught since you were a child. It steals all of that away and puts you in a new place. But I'd always rather be in the place where you're informed, where you have the truth, rather than you just have the story after story after story. I mean, religion essentially is a brainwashing from birth to believe whatever it is that whatever priest or imam tells you. Here we have something that we've been told doesn't exist for the longest time, and now we have what I think is fairly absolute proof what it does. And I just think that NASA have to announce and put their hands up and start telling us what they've got, because every now and then your president, usually just before they're elected, says, well, if I get in there, I'm going to tell everybody everything, and then of course they get in and they tell everybody nothing. I think what you've got there is immense. You should be thoroughly proud of yourself, Heather, because I think it's an amazing thing, and you've dealt with it in exactly the right way. You know, you've reached out to people that know, and they've all come to roughly the same the same view at the end of it all. You should be absolutely thrilled, and I'm honoured that I've had the chance to talk to you about it, Heather. It's been a total joy.
Oh, well, it has been a pleasure, and I highly encourage you, if you can, or anybody on your staff, to go to the website and download it and print out a copy. And when you print out a copy and you've got it in your hands, there's something about that just makes it a little easier to read, a little easier to look at, and it really has a big punch. And I think this has spooked ufology in general. And I just want to share one thing with you here before we go.
Sure.
There's a line in this document that really has grabbed a hold of me and sunk its hooks into me, and it is this. It's talking about how the different EBEs travel through space, and it says, some alteration or control of the passage of time on board the in-transit craft is used as well.
Whoa. And we heard that some of the craft had facets that were still workable. So what you're talking about here is ghosts, aliens, time travel. True.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. In the government's own words, in the government's own document prepared for President Bush. This would have been prepared for George H.W. Bush right before his inauguration. This January 8th, 1989. He would have took office January 20th, 1989, having won the election November 8th, 1988. So this is the paperwork that a president would have got right before he thinks he's going to spill the secrets. And this is just a beginning. It says in the document, this is just a preliminary briefing document. The full briefing will follow. So I can tell you, I would pay good money to see what that full briefing is.
Well, we're going to be waiting to see what the next step is, because it's out there, and I've felt over the last 4 or 5 years that something was coming, something mighty, and I believe this to be the beginning of it. And thank you so much for sharing your time, Heather. It's been a true joy, and I thank you for it.
Absolutely, it sure has, and thank you very much for having me on your show.
We allowed our clientele, our lessees to come forward.
So whenever anybody says to you, there's no such thing as aliens, take it from me, they don't have literally thousands of people working here every single day because there aren't any aliens. They've got thousands of people working here every day because the things that are going on here are probably beyond our comprehension. Alan Robson, I hope you've enjoyed your time with us as we've shown you a few amazing things from around the world, from Area 51, Roswell, the Dreamland, for the Night Owls. From me, Alan Robson, good night, God bless you, and I wish you well.